All right. Welcome everyone to the Altered Weekly Online League Season 2, Week 3 Wednesday event. I'm your host, Jalix, at the Tabletop Tinker on all the things, joined by a man who needs no introduction, but I'm contractually obligated to give him one anyways. Please welcome the Keelan guy. Keelan guy, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, Jalix. Excited to be here.
Yeah, super good to have you. We are currently looking at the registration for the Wednesday Weekly 3. I see 54 participants already, so a strong start and still about 10 minutes to get registered and signed up. So if you would like to do so, go ahead and check the description underneath the stream. You'll see a link to the Board Game Arena itself, and also you can check out our information there. Further information can be found on the Discord as well. Keelan guy, we're in week 3 now, which means that we are,
hmm
heading towards a crystallized meta, but still some room for innovation. What kind of things are you hoping to see tonight?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, in general, in these tournaments, there's been a massive variety of decks, especially going into the, Trial by Frost meta now. I think there's still a ton of innovation happening, and I don't think it's really settled yet, actually, what the true like best deck might be. I think everyone knows that Aphanis is super strong. We were seeing that at the end of Beyond the Gates as well. I think that deck was honestly head and shoulders above the rest at the very end of Beyond the Gates there, but I do think there's a lot of interesting options coming out for other decks and other factions as well. I would specifically say there's really good sort of glue commons that were printed in Trial by Frost for factions like Lyra or Bravos in cards like Will o' the Wisp or even Haven and Sarengar from Bravos that I think have really been filling in some of the holes that those strategies had previously. So I don't think the lists are anywhere close to at their final form yet. It takes a while sometimes. Tons of interesting configurations going around, but we're seeing tons of different decks. Tasia's still up there. We're seeing decent showings from Navenka and everything. Kojo, we've seen Basira flying around a bit, and of course, like Sigismar, perennial top finishing deck. I've even seen some Sierra, so that's exciting to see as well.
Yeah, I cast last week as well, and felt like every single matchup was Kojo versus Tasia. So would love to see some Sierra as we're heading into this, but also with all the new innovations in both Bravos and Muna, I still think there's room for some new things, and excited to see what folks come up with. Now, you're an expert as far as the teams go. You seem to be getting an early start on the historian for Altered. So, is there anybody in particular that you're hoping to see tonight? Any rivalries that the viewers should know about?
It's always a little hard because, especially, there's some discrepancy between the North American time zone events and the European time zones events. I mean, we're having awesome registration numbers as it stands for this event right now. We're around 57 at this point, but which is great. But we've seen some of these Monday tournaments going on to up to the 128 player cap and everything. And interestingly, that also does influence like what teams are going to be showing up. Some of the more perennial French teams, for example, like your Agité, your Altered Aces, it's less likely we'll see as many of their players on an event like this. But I would expect that we might be seeing people from teams like After You from Brazil, for example, who would definitely be more able to show up for that America's time zone a little bit easier. So hoping to see them, and otherwise, I'm hoping a couple of my teammates in AQZ will show up as well, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen quite a few folks from South America have a strong showing in these recent events, so excited to see more from them as well. Well, we're at the 5 minute mark for registration, and as Keelan Guy mentioned, I'm seeing 57 people in the event. So, if you want to stop somebody from getting a buy round, please go ahead and join us tonight. Again, the link for that is in the video description. You can go ahead and click on that, it'll bring you right to Board Game Arena. And just make sure folks are playing with the same deck throughout the evening tonight. And if you have any questions, let us know in chat. We'd be happy to help you out. So Keelan guy, what does someone do like you do up this late on the other side of the pond?
That's a great question. No, I mean, honestly, if I wasn't commentating, joining you here tonight here on the desk, I would otherwise likely be playing. I've been making a habit of, adjusting my schedule to try to fit it in whenever possible. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's always a blast, but when I can, happy to commentate. sort of the thing I'm trying to transition a bit more into, even rather than playing in many cases. It's just, a little interesting having to use my indoor voice during the middle of the night here, but, that's, it's a good place to be. I'm happy about it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you have been known for winning a previous event with Afanis. Is that still a deck that you're working to innovate with? Have you tried any of the new card configurations from Trial by Frost in there, or are you off brewing in another corner at this time?
I am predominantly playing Afanis at the moment, yes. I've been joking around that I have no idea how to play my deck currently, which is hilarious, but also sort of true. I think things have been changing a lot there, and I think some of the free rolls that I would used to get in some matchups don't feel like that anymore. There's just more things I have to play around. And interestingly for me as well, I think I had a very reactive style of gameplay with Afanis, at least
Mhm.
when I was doing really well with it, End of Beyond the Gates. And I think that that reactive style is a lot harder to make work currently. I think more the proactive, just slam a really strong strategy style of Afanis is working a bit better. And so for me, that's been a bit of a struggle actually transitioning. But there's just there's a ton of interesting things to be cooking with. We've been seeing, especially from Afanis, there's a lot of variety in different builds that are popping up. There's Nylum builds that are really leveraging these new exhaust mechanic cards, which I think are really interesting, but definitely sort of a different style of gameplay there, looking to potentially trade off some of the early turns, less of these early power plays to steal expeditions and more just trying to set up some sort of snowball over time. Um, but also, there's some really interesting builds with Icebound Tundra that I think are actually really cool. That's the out of faction, I believe it's Lyra Icebound Permanent.
Mhm.
That's the one where if you play a character in a region that it does not have a stat in, or at least one of like the native stat points. I can't remember the exact wording there.
Mhm.
That it gets the trial markers. But I think that card might be actually really strong in Afanis as well. Um, but otherwise, you see Cole in the chat there saying tree, tree, tree. Yeah, I'm a big fan of moth right now in general. Whenever you make a moth, that's yeah, that's my thing. That's my jam.
Yeah, as an Afanis player myself, I tend to like to stick with a good list and innovate on it. I'm terrible at brewing in general. I'm happy with the amount of moths I've seen flying around, and honestly surprised that Rhyme Frost has been as powerful as it is. But uh, I've been cooking with Muna recently and found that Jack Frost in the mirror has been a game breaker for me. I've been losing every game where my opponents played a Jack Frost, so I am looking to add that tech to my deck as well. And yeah, I thought for Afanis purposes, we'd get a little bit more leverage out of sleight of hand, but that does not seem to be the case right now. I haven't seen a whole lot of folks playing with more than maybe one copy of that card out of faction. So, um, that's one that I would like
Yeah,
to see more in the future at some point.
it's true. It can just be hard to make those rare slots work for the deck in a lot of cases there. I mean, Moth to a Flame specifically does seem like the closest thing to an auto include that
Mm.
Afanis really got out of it, as far as I'm concerned. But the rare slots are much more heavily contested in that deck. I would say though, at least Sleight of Hand does synergize really well with Nylum specifically because it does exhaust itself with that cooldown mechanic that it has. But
Mhm.
yeah, as you mentioned, Jack Frost's super sweet. I think that both out of Muna and out of Ordis, I've seen it and it's looked pretty good in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
And
Jack Frost,
yeah,
Occlude, all of these different options for exhausting cards have just really been putting up some work. I have lost track of time as we've been talking. It looks
the
like we are up to
tournament is
64
up. Yes.
participants. Yeah, and the tournament's live. As you were scrolling through the list of matchups, is there anybody in particular you'd like to see?
I think once they get started, I think I would love Table 3, Gino against Westwill.
Excellent. I'll go ahead and get this match queued up for us. Any particular reason that you're interested in these guys? Or do you just like
Yeah,
the profile
Westwill
pictures?
has I also like the profile pictures, to be fair. Nice little lightning bolt going on versus a fish. I'm definitely a fan of that, but, no, Westwill's been playing, excellently over a while, especially in these North American tournaments, both in Ace as well as AWOL events, which is super sweet. And I believe it was Gino who actually had a live result relatively recently, I wanna say in the Netherlands, with a pretty I think it was Goalrang even, like a really solid result in the tournament there. So,
It's pretty exciting.
solid live player as well.
Yeah, no kidding. Right. Well, I'm going to adjust our settings just a little bit on the stream so you can see the players and their clocks. And we are about to get started. Wes Will wishing a nice good luck, have fun in the chat. Ooh, starting off strong with Asadi and Surge versus Ghoulring and Toxin. Not the most popular characters for either of those symbols, but definitely both got a lot of new heat from the new set. What cards are you going to be looking for in particular from these two heroes?
I was going to say this is already amazing. This would
Yeah,
almost be like a joke matchup had it been like Beyond the Gates meta, but
right.
I'm excited. I'm expecting big things here. I would honestly assume at this point that the Atsadi player is likely going to be making use of the Sakuraburu plus energy bars synergy. For those of you who haven't seen it, energy bars giving gigantic to a character means that if you play a Sakuraburu in that expedition, it will actually set back both opponents' expeditions. So I'm assuming that's part of the game plan here for the Atsadi player. Could be wrong, you never know. But yeah, I definitely think that's likely to be showing up. And then otherwise, Golrang has also seen a lot of innovation. I would just expect, yeah, the card that we're seeing coming out right away, field reinforcements, definitely a strong one. And just, a lot of things that will produce tokens and otherwise potentially some landmarks as well. Oftentimes, Ortis Carrier can actually be a pretty solid card in Golrang in comparison to other Ortis decks.
For sure. Pushing through those stats early on is really good. We're well into the game here, though. Very exciting. So we're seeing a good start from both players with some new cards. The 1-2 punch from Atsadi of Tiny Jin plus Haven Seringar there. Something I've been seeing a lot in the first couple turns of these games. You're going to see some card advantage off of that on the second turn, able to ramp and also get some card draw. And then from Goring side, a very quick reinforcements followed by the mobile armory. Yeah, mobile armory, which allows our
Yeah,
characters to move
beautiful.
forward even with defender. So both players able to take an advance on the companion side in that first round. And following up here with an
Yeah,
Ortis spy to get through some of the resource advantage that we were about to see from Itzadi.
that was really, I think, from both players, some of the strongest starts that you could expect from a setup like that as well.
100%.
Itzadi specifically having Tiny Jin to start off the game, but then also a card that threatens to just be more card draw and good tempo, like Haven Sarengar. Super awesome start, but really just matched there by Golrang really well. Mobile Armory, super efficient that turn. Field reinforcements draws a card in addition to making a token, which is sweet. And luckily, having an Orda spy to at least prevent some of the more absurd value that Utsadi could early generate. I think it was interesting already seeing that Orda spy chose to go after the Haven Sarengar instead of the Tiny Jin. Essentially, what they're saying there is they're less worried about the ramp as they are about the card advantage. Maybe that could be a choice just based on matchup dynamics. Frankly, I'm completely unfamiliar with how Golrang should be playing in a matchup like this. So that could be a playstyle choice, could be something that's just objectively correct to do. But this player is the expert. I have no clue.
Yeah, I find myself in the same spot here. But what's funny is that looking at Atsadi in just the Beyond the Gates meta, as Atsadi plays out a Spindle Moon of Bastion, we saw a lot of just clunky lists. I'd see Atsadi's pass on their first turn altogether because they were just focused on hitting that top end and would end up with a lot of cards. Now we're seeing a lot more glue pieces like the Jin, like the Sarengar, those cards that are allowing us to progress our game state early on and then finish with these beaters, like you mentioned, the
Mm.
1-2 punch of the candy bar plus the sakura brew. And in fact, here we've seen Golrang and Toxin put out that Ortis carrier, as you mentioned. We're going to see a lot of value out of that as we're going into these following turns.
Yeah, interestingly, Westwill was actually playing as Sadi even before Beyond the Gates. So this
Mm,
is someone who I would both assume. I'm sorry, back in Beyond the Gates, even before Trial by Frost. This is someone who I assume will actually have suitable uniques for the deck, but also just have a better appreciation in general, rather than just slamming maximum expensive cards.
mhm.
Having these early turns like this, where the deck just feels like a good Bravos deck, that's so important. And I think this Spindle Munibastion that we're seeing in play is this out of faction rare permanent. That really shows off one of these, sort of experience techs that's so important for Itzadi here. One of the worst feelings is when you finally get up to enough mana and then your stuff just starts getting like beauty sleeped or just removed really efficiently. That definitely helps prevent that, which is really nice. And yeah, otherwise, yeah, Golrang also with a really good setup But at the moment, I think the real question mark here is Atsadi about to start playing really absurd things? I
Mhm.
think they're sort of going to be hard pressed to do so here. They need to get it going. Golrang does have a really nice spot otherwise, but if they can set something up quickly, I think it's going to look good for Atsadi.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I'm really enjoying about some of these new cards, like the mobile armory that we saw helping lose defender, Goalrang used to be this terrifying engine that they weren't moving very much on the board as they were getting their game plan going, and you were just kind of dreading the 8 mana turn when that would pop along. Nowadays, you're seeing things that are allowing us to advance even if we have defender. So both of these players are actually making some reasonable progress on the tumble as we go along, and still really haven't even hit that end game scenario. As of next turn, I think we're going to start seeing even more haymakers. Oh, but the first Sakurabru is coming down and pushing us back an expedition all the way back into our starting hero spot.
Yeah, that's definitely a nice one. At least it will prevent this turn from becoming too absurd for the Golrang, even though they're likely to be starting to turn the corner here and threaten a double advance pretty much every turn. But as it stands, the Sakurabru, it does a good job. It at least shores up one expedition or prevents essentially one advance through route setting them back one this turn, but also drawing them a card. That's really important here. At least entering these later stages of the game, this is where the Atsadi hero ability is now live. When they're playing things like this, they're going to be drawing cards, and the more cards they see, the more big things they'll have to play. So, yeah, it's good to start seeing something come out like the Sakurabru. But yeah, they're still, I guess, just looking for more gas to otherwise fight off the number of tokens that are likely to start getting generated here really quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and it looks like we're seeing. Oh, interesting. So we've just deployed a unique Sinisa to the companion expedition. Defender characters don't prevent from moving forward. Has defender, and then
And if you
apologies here.
control two or more permanents, you can exhaust target card in reserve. That's
Pretty,
really cool.
yeah, pretty big fan of that. Good stats all the way around. And as we see, we were able to score a progression to the second Baba Yaga coming out from hand.
I
So
also
both
want to
players are
note
2
this
spots away.
unique specifically. This
Mhm.
this permanent restriction that the Sunisa has, it's not a landmark restriction. And sometimes some of these like unplayable tier
Mm,
uniques that a lot of people would note previously, where if you control two or more landmarks, which is just so hard to find. But with the new set, especially, cards like Mobile Armory will be enabling this, and cards like that will often be sticking around for Golrang. So it's actually really likely that they're going to be able to activate that effect. So that's actually a really cool card play there. Love it.
yeah, that's an excellent point with the permanent versus landmark distinction. And we see my nemesis, Jack Frost, coming down for the second exhaust. Really hamstringing what Atsadi can do here without burning through a bunch of cards from hand. And also asking the question, can you double advance on the next turn? Because I am sure trying to do that on my turn.
Yeah, it's one of these funny things here where this Jack Frost, the exhausted two cards in reserve currently, are actually going to function a bit like a Baku here, actually. Two cards in reserve already means that the Itzadi player will have to discard down when the Haven Bouncer enters reserve at the end of the day. And anything else they play from hand, if it doesn't stick around on the table, like this potential Eat Me Energy bars might, if the Golrang doesn't have removal for it, that will end up forcing them to discard more and more cards. So really strong play in these later turns. Jack Frost, super nice, but yeah, it was definitely pretty important from the Atsadi here to have something like this energy bars that would just stick around, not deplete all their resources, while still trying to create some sort of advantage here. But yeah, I would assume Goldrang taking this long to find a decision here. I don't think they have removal for it this turn, so Atsadi might have a chance next turn to do something big. But
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah, Goldrang driving closer and closer to just a victory on expeditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And burning that Baba Yaga there for a card draw, we're just going to max out what's in the reserve and have the most options possible for next turn. So that seems perfectly fine. The scariest thing we have here from Etsadi is just saying absolutely not to what our opponent is doing by playing that second Sakurabru from hand into the Eat Me Energy Bar expedition and pushing Gorang back, wasting all that hard work from the previous turn. So I'll be interested to see if we're able to pull that off here.
Definitely. Notably, one Sakurabu already having been played, they do not get that effect again when played from reserve. So they're going to need something fresh in order to reset some of the progress there. Wondering what uniques might also be able to come out here, but as it stands, yeah, Westwill starts its turn on the Itzadi, just playing out that Sakurabu from reserve, just matching the stats we see on board already from these Ordis recruits. Golrang ability very much live. These tokens no longer have defender, and they're threatening to win the game.
Yeah, with 6 mana left over here from Etsadi, I think that our Goring player can breathe a sigh of relief that no second Sakurabru is coming from hand. Um, a decent chance to just go ahead and snipe this Jin with our Jack Frost if we're worried about setting up resources, and it looks like we might be doing that exact thing. And so now Etsadi and Goreng will just be racing to fill up the companion expedition, and if Goreng can win that race, we will have the match point.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what cards can come out here from Itzadi that'll stabilize. The Itzadi being at 7 heroism counters already means that, with that 6 mana remaining, they weren't able to draw a card playing anything either. Plays out Haven Sarengar at the moment, which does do a good job. Luckily for them, the Golrang Companion Expedition is on that forest tile, and that's the one that Sarengar is strong on, but imagine there's just tons of different characters that could potentially take it from Golrang or other spells as well. And yeah, we see West will pass, so that will be the win in the match one for Golrang. Gino, nice job.
Right. Well, well played to both players here. Definitely a cool showing from two characters that we're not seeing as often as you might think. But as we're heading into this new meta, anything's possible. So, once again, congratulations to Gino, and we will go ahead and find another game.
Anything that's striking your eye immediately?
Not while I wait for my computer to load. There's not.
Fair
But
enough. I'm
anybody in
scrolling now
particular
as
you'd like to see? I'm seeing Tay2 versus Runefolk, which was a
well.
matchup I think we saw last week as well. Interested to see what both players are up to today. So
I'm
let's
happy
head
to
into
jump
that
into
game.
that.
Yeah,
Yep,
for sure. Oh, right. Ooh. Here comes two more interesting heroes. We've got Lindway and Ma. Definitely saw some upgrades from this new set, and it looks like one of those is in the reserve right now with our Lantern. Meanwhile, Fen is getting the old value game going once again. Tons of cards available to grind out this game, and an aloe vera already on board for additional pressure on our Lindway player.
yeah, in Fenn's discard, we're also seeing the rare copy of Haven Sarengar out of faction. Definitely a
Yeah,
strong one in Lyra now as well, which is super sweet. And yeah, Lindaway definitely got some relevant cards for the archetype. I'm excited to see it. Yeah, I'm wondering to what extent Rune is building around it, actually. Um, I think, in general, some of the stronger builds for Lindaway haven't been super focused on some of the large, like more splashy things when you play them, effect style Lindaway sacrifice archetype cards, like examples there being like Kuat, for example. But I think just more things in general that just grind out small bits of value. Chrysalis, really strong for that. Just synergizing really well with Baba's Isba and the Maw from the Lindaway hero ability. Super nice. But, yeah, as it stands, I think, both of these decks are actually looking pretty strong.
yeah, Lindaway slightly in the lead here too as we're heading into the end of this day. Both players still have plenty of options going on. Interesting to see what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the discard of Lindaway just so we can get a little bit more information on what we're playing. So we've got some common gift of self, a Katagirian alchemist, moonlight jellyfish, and chrysalis. Chrysalis, of course, making a nice little combo with the moth lantern, allowing us to make two moths and lose the defender in the expedition if we choose to do so. So some neat little combos going on here. And of course, as soon as we add moth to that, we get a lot more value going too.
Definitely. And we just saw now, Off You Go being fired off on this Anansi here. The discard now for our Fen player has all 3 copies of Anansi into it. So unless they're able to get through the remaining 16 cards in their deck and then start looping those cards from discard, that is it for Anansi's, and that is often one of the strongest cards that will come out from the Fen over the course of the game. That hero ability innately just sort of powering up cards like Anansi. plays really well with aloe vera, but there won't be any more of that. So I'm starting to worry a little bit for Tatu that that's going to be hard, especially if this game goes, more than another turn or two. If they need to shore up on specific stat lines as well. Lyra is a faction that does sometimes struggle to get the correct stat when needed. And yeah, Anansi sort of a critical card from that they're no longer going to have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've seen some Lyra players sort of hedging their bets and playing the winter outfits as a card to help with that. Winter outfits helping characters get their max stat to represent all of their stats. So, for example, if it's played in the expedition with aloe vera is now looking as a 4/4/4. Is that a card that you've looked into for this particular strategy, or any troubles you might have with it?
I definitely think that that is one of the stronger cards in Lyra at the moment, or at least one of the stronger new options I think people have been cooking with. In a lot of cases, though, for Fen, I have a feeling that there are simply some more impactful things that are sort of necessary for a deck to function. So I do think that that is in one of these slots where you might be playing it and it might be good, or you might not be, and I think that might also be just as reasonable not to be. So I'm not quite sure here, honestly, whether Tatu's choosing to play it or not. But I know some other strategies in Lyra have been trying to make use of that card as well. It definitely does solve some of the problems that even decks like Aurak potentially have in a lot of cases with
Yeah,
those zero stats going across. But yeah, currently just Lindaway looking really strong here. So many moths out in play on the hero side, and Maw just getting more and more buff on Canyon. Yeah, off you go, coming out as a needed removal to get an expedition progression there on the companion side. So and does turn here, but at what cost? Still a lot of resources going to be left here for Lindaway. A lot of those resources are just sitting in play, notably Mothlanter sticking around as it did not progress on that side. And it's also likely that the Izmir hero is typically going to be playing more copies of Small Step Giant Leap in their deck in comparison to a Lyra hero. So we'll see.
for sure. A note from Runefolk there. A very exciting turn, says Runefolk, the Lindway player. We saw some interesting sequencing there. The acapella training came out to tag our Chrysalis, making sure that we were incentivized to play out our Moth Lantern. And then, of course, on the backside of that play, Fen was able to shut the door with a second Tinkerbell to block off our water, which is what we needed for the Hero Expedition Lindaway to advance. So very cool to see that blockage. However, it does leave the door open for the Moth Lantern plays this turn to add some additional token characters for our Lindway player. But this Tinkerbell is going to make some short work of the reserve and ask Lindway to continue spending those cards from hand to gain any traction in this particular board state. But a
I've
Baba's
been
Isba coming
loving
up.
seeing one cost spells from Fen, like the acapella training that you were mentioned, I think have been some of the more interesting cards to see, just coming out in general, and one of the more skill testing things that you can really tell the caliber of the Fen player based on how well they use those one cost spells as sort of an after you effect to get maximum information before really cashing out on all of the reserve cards that they typically build up over time. To get, for example, potential cost reduction for something larger that they need, or otherwise, cash in cards like Hatter for anchoring things, Hathor to pick up the cards they need. So I think that's been something that's really nice to see. Runefolk plays as a second copy of Baba's Isba here, threatening to after you repeatedly. But I'm interested to see what will actually come out here from Runefolk to either take an expedition, shore up another. Beauty Sleep for the moment does put one Tinkerbell to sleep, and Fen is likely to only get one more play of a card this turn. It potentially is going to be this Aloe Vera from the reserve, but unless they have a spell like I wouldn't even know what. I guess unless they have a two-cost character plus a one-cost spell in hand, it's very likely that they're going to have to show their entire hand before Lindaway chooses their final decisions for this turn.
Yep, and it looks like we're going to move directly into that aloe vera. So, Lindway has the chance to respond. I don't think. Oh, okay. So we're heading into the companion expedition. A little surprising because of how good the stats are on that side. But we're going to take a look at this Dorothy Gale here. From hand, we can put a card from our hand into reserve. And if it's a spell, we can send target character to reserve. So in this case, we're just popping that Tinkerbell. And then from both sides, sending a character with, sorry, sending target character with hand cost 3 or less to reserve. So we were able to snap off that one as well.
That was a disgusting play, and it wins the game on the
Absolutely.
spot here because it will be passing the turn right back to Lindaway, who shows off that small step giant leap. There's no question about whether they draw it. It's just right there in reserve. No chance to sabotage it either. Wow, really nice line.
Yeah, no kidding. And
Yeah,
small step
Lindaway,
will
one of these
officially
decks that
seal the
just
deal.
benefits so much from just waiting as long as possible before having to make those critical decisions there. Especially now with cards like Moth Lantern, it gives you a lot more flexibility about where and when you're putting out stats onto the board as well, which is super nice. Runefolk definitely a player who's had a lot of experience on Lindaway over time as well. So it's nice to see them, leveraging the deck, some of the new tools, even without using, for example, these Moonlight Jellyfish that have been suspended, at least in their current iteration, for uniques. So hey, maybe the deck can be really good without them. Sweet.
Yeah, definitely exciting to see as players are continuing to move. As you mentioned, that there's still so much room to brew with these cards, and even established players such as yourself are testing out new tech all the time. So it'll be excellent to watch as these things develop. We're getting pretty close to the end of this round, but I do see a couple matches still in the works, including one by KRA Kaifu and Get Back Baby on table 26. So I'm going to head down there to show off some gameplay.
Sweet. Let's jump in. Kaifu, one of the main members of Team Krakeb from Quebec. I believe they're the second in command, at least, of the team.
Awesome.
And that is one of these newer teams that's been developing. Yeah, as I mentioned, from Quebec, that's a Canadian team. Name Krakeb being based on the Kraken, who is the main antagonist from the first season of Altered, and then Quebec, the province. So yeah, it's a local team there, and they've been having some decent results, especially Kaifu and I believe Zypo as well have both had really good results in AWOL tournaments thus far.
Well, very cool. It's good to hear some information about the teams as we're going through here. So thank you for providing that. And yeah, excited to see
Gladly.
that Sierra has made it into our coverage this week. That was a notable absence last week. No Axiom players made it onto the coverage. So excited to see that here. And a fully stacked reserve here for our Aphanis player with double Spindle Harvester uniques. We're pretty familiar with most of those,
Yeah,
so we'll get those in a minute. But let's first check out this Repotter Otter. So
yeah. One
from
of the
anywhere.
interesting things I was just going to say, one of the interesting things going on here is the fact that these spindle harvesters are very different than one another. One of them, classic spell return. Other one is actually a resupply spindle harvesters. Really cool.
Oh, wow. Uh, that's really good. Yeah. So a 2/2 spindle harvester with a single water stat from anywhere gains anchored. And when you play a spell, if I have one or more boosts, resupply. So yeah, a lot of card advantage potential from this particular spindle harvester. And it also helps a spell lose fleeting. So if you want to get real cheeky in the late game, possibly getting a double dip on a small step giant leap across 2 turns.
And yeah, that Repotter Otter that you were mentioning, really cool for Sierra, already having that support ability that activates the abilities of a permanent you control, or at least the what is it, the enters abilities, or when you play it from anywhere.
The from anywhere.
That is yeah, that is one of those sort of key support abilities that oftentimes people are just looking for on uniques for a Sierra deck. But noting the other effects that this card has, that's a super strong Repotter Otter. Can put something from hand into reserve, often less relevant than when a card goes from your hand or deck into reserve, you create a 2/2/2 Brass Bug token. That is super nice.
Absolutely. So that's counting resupplies, that's counting cards from hand, just a ton of opportunities for extra value. And as we see from the Pyro Bastion and Axiom Reprocessor rare combo here, we're getting to see a lot of cards pick exactly what we want to go there and get some value in the meantime. One of the things that we saw in most Sierra builds for Beyond the Gates was leaning hard into the rare brass bug hive. Is that something you expect to see players pivot further away from as we open up the options for our landmarks in this new set?
Yeah, I think in general, something that a few players have been picking up, and actually over multiple Axiom heroes, is in general how some of these lower cost landmarks than even just Brassbug Hive, how impactful cards like Ouroboros Lyra Bastion can be. Of course, in this specific case, not more impactful than simply playing a small step giant leap to win the game. But we
Yeah,
did see Kaifu loop their deck there. They went into the second deck pile. That's the sort of thing that I definitely can expect to see players doing a little bit more often, actually, is churning through their entire deck, reshuffling their discard. There's definitely some cool strategies that could be enabled there. In general, anything that Kaifu's playing that I've seen thus far has been really interesting like that. I know they were playing Arjun last week,
mm,
really cool strategies from this player, but in this case, not good enough against the more stereotypical win the game with small step giant leap strategy after playing Spindle Harvester uniques from Aphanis. It's, what I'm used to seeing.
yep. Turns out win the game cards are still good. So we are down to, it looks like the last two matches for round one. I will go ahead and jump into one of those and we'll see if we can get any gameplay before everything. Oh, there we go. This game has ended. So I think we'll just be sitting tight here for a second as we head into the round two pairings in just a moment.
No worries. Interestingly, I did mention earlier that I thought it was a little bit less likely that we'd be seeing some representation from more of the European teams, but actually, Altered Aces is out in droves tonight. I think there's at least four, maybe even five players from Altered Aces. Between actually, I believe one of them did drop after the loss in the first round there to Runefolk, but otherwise, Cladius, I believe that's the team captain or team founder even of Altered Aces, and various other people that we've been seeing in other tournaments at the highest level. Popeye doing really well. Um, Karnag's in it as well. So yeah, that's actually pretty surprising late at night for these French people, and yeah, cool to see it. Nice job to
Yeah.
them showing up.
And doesn't seem to be keeping them from being at the top of their game as they are tearing through these early rounds. Be interesting to see how far we get along in the tournament and still see these folks performing at the top tables. I did have one final match, and it looks like we're pretty close to the end state here, but we'll go ahead and see it through. Our first appearance of Sigismar, one of the better heroes in the current meta, and one that we've been seeing a lot of on coverage and in the top tables on things like 39cards.com for deck lists. And then also our Afanis player here. So yeah, heading into this late game, and Afanis a little shy on resources, but that hasn't stopped him before. So we might see a progression here as well.
Yeah, honestly, Sigismar has been awesome, continues to be awesome. Got a bunch of new tools from the recent set as well. Currently, the one we see in play has a one mana token producer unique in play as well. That is super strong. The Ortus Cadets there. Whenever another non token character joins your expeditions, you create a 1/1/1 Ortus recruit in your companion expedition. That is so good for one mana, both from hand and from reserve there. Really an excellent card. I mean, conversely, from Aphanis at the moment, we're stuck seeing the common Baba Yaga try to face down in an expedition that it's not well suited for, and needing to prevent a progression on both sides here, while Sigismar just keeps playing out more and more things. I think this one looks pretty locked up to me for Karnag.
Yeah, unless Aphanis has found a three-cost celebration day hiding somewhere in their deck, I think we might be seeing this head in Sigismar's favor. But let's not count him out quite yet. And what's our Aphanis player thinking of now?
Interestingly, in discard, I see a rare copy of Tiny Jail, and I am convinced that this is one of the more matchup breaking cards specifically that Sigismar can be playing into Aphanis. Some of the more absurd starts that Aphanis can get in any matchup involve playing something that gets anchored on turn one, even better if it is a unique, and then just playing a spell to boost it up as well. Makes it contest a little bit on expeditions, even against, different characters that can be played out from Sigismar often. But oftentimes, Sigismar can nowadays simply send it to reserve directly and play another character, get a double progression, and just say, "Hey, look at my reserve. I will play another Tiny Jail the next turn if you try to replay it." Super strong, and I think that that is one of these techs that we're going to see more and more. The more popular Aphanis is, the more people think that that is the deck to beat. The more copies of card like that we'll see coming out of Sigismar, and more often it'll be really good into Aphanis. So super cool, good tech.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see in these games where it's a best of one format. A lot of cards are very strong, but only into particular heroes or strategies. So those kind of cards don't always make the final list as players just sort of pod race into the best version of their own deck. But as the meta starts to shape up and you see certain players at the top tables consistently, you can sort of start to tune your deck just a little bit to hit those particular heroes. So as you mentioned, Tiny Jail doing a good job of that here. But we are wrapping up with this final round. So that is our last game for round one. Board Game Arena will be pairing this very soon. If you're just joining us, this is the Altered Weekly Online League, Season 2, Week 3, Wednesday. We had 64 players total for this event today and are very happy to have you all here in chat, as well as all of our players in the event. If you did not make it into the event today but want to play in the future, we do have a European time zone event on Mondays. That is 1 o'clock Eastern time for you folks in the US who are joining us now, as well as the 7 o'clock Wednesday. And the links to those are always going to be in our video description. So make sure that you subscribe today to the AWOL stream.
And
Keelan
notably,
Guy,
I would also recommend joining the AWOL Discord for that as well. Simon does a really good job of keeping people updated about when tournaments are coming, and will often put a helpful time code as well in the posts about it via tournament announcements. So it'll be really easy to tell in your local time zone what tournaments might work out for you.
yep, no need to set your clocks yourself. Simon is more than happy to keep you posted. As we're heading into round two, any tables in particular stand out to you?
Nah, you drag me around this time. I'll join.
All right, sounds good. Let's head to table six, where it looks like we have a little team fight going on between Claudius and Popeye from the Altered Aces.
Oh, I love these. I've had a few of them myself, but oh, this one's also a mirror match. That's going to be fun.
All right, double Sigismar. So, starting into turn one with the rare faction shifted Baba Yaga for card draw. And it looks like we're taking a smaller scale approach with this Foundry engineer, excuse me, mechanic from Popeye. And a gift of self, some card draw. So both players will be progressing here on alternate sides of the tumult, keeping a nice
Yeah,
even cadence
really
so far.
really interesting seeing a card like Gift of Self coming out there for Popeye. That is not the sort of thing that every Sigmar player is choosing to play. I believe in that rare slot, Cladius is likely using more copies of removal, potentially Tiny Jail, like I was mentioning before. I believe there's just a single one from Popeye, so that might be a little difference that we'll see there. But just having more access to cards early is definitely not a bad thing to have when you get a free token each turn just from the Sigmar hero ability, which is pretty sweet. But I must say, just Baba Yaga opener in general is so nice to have. Yeah, really nice position for Cladius. I like it.
For sure. All right, so we're redeploying this Foundry mechanic here.
And you know, actually, I think this is one of these matchups where there are so many different ways that you can build the deck, and there are so many different ways that any individual game of Sigmar Mirror Match can go. It's a super skill testing matchup. You need to be hyper aware of how much stats you can put onto the board and how you're able to split them. In the case of these token producer uniques, like the one that we just saw got played right now,
Hmm.
it puts the recruit token into the companion expedition, for example, and that is the sort of dynamic that's really interesting, trying to note where you can make stats and when. So, you know, that's actually, it's sort of a good spot for both players. I like it. It's a really aggressive play using this Ordis Trooper so early from Cladius, but I really like it, especially given the turn order. It won't be able to be sabotaged before they're able to play it out from their reserve again. So that's going to be super nice and pretty much is likely to demand removal right off the bat next turn. And it's already looking really strong. Needs to be a good 2 mana or double 1 mana play coming out from Popeye to shore up both expeditions at this point. I have a feeling it's likely they're either going to trade or Cladius might just take a 2 expedition lead.
Yeah, a super strong showing this early in the game. And as you mentioned there, I think it's a good note for folks who might be looking to level up their gameplay with Altered. Um, things like considering the fact that the Orders Trooper can be played first on the following turn and avoid any sort of sabotage effects. Um, you look at their opening hand of just three simple cards and think, there might not be a whole lot of maneuvering to be done, but if you really drill down and start to consider, what are your outs? What are the options to draw throughout the game? Planning those kinds of turns to make your cards either impervious to removal or any other manner of considerations can be the difference between winning double expeditions on the tumble at any given time.
Yeah, it's also just so nice. Like looking at these one cost token producers like the Ordis Trooper we're seeing in play, this one has sort of a built-in restriction. This if you control three or more characters clause on the when another non-token character joins your expeditions. Notably though, with playing Sigismar, that's actually not a restriction at all.
Hmm.
If Cladius starts out his next turn just by playing that out from reserve, any character he plays will automatically enable that. So there's functionally no restriction as long as they don't lose one of those characters to removal right away. And yeah, it does look that Popeye did manage to at least progress on that hero side, at least. But as it stands, Cladius has taken a one expedition lead. Uh, on the plus side, at least for Popeye, they are working with one more card, so we'll see if that card advantage potentially lets them catch up a little bit. But they're going to be on the defensive here.
Yeah, bureaucrats coming back in force here to enforce some card draw and also just be a really nice low cost play into this particular board state. So um, if this is a spot where Cladius is able to maintain their tempo and just take one expedition at a time and make sure that fellow Sigismar is not getting ahead on the board, they could be just cruising right into a win.
And yeah, I'm interested as to what Popeye's going to do here to deal with this Ortis Trooper. I think the optimal scenario, okay, that's beautiful. Plays a Monolith Ortis Bastion, just completely ignores that this Ortis Trooper will double advance this turn, and instead says, I'm going to try to make it really difficult for you to ever progress ever again in following turns. And wow, this is and then, yet another beautiful follow up. Cladius immediately just recognizes that and just plays out a card or to spy to remove some of the critical pieces that will be so, so good in subsequent turns for Popeye. That being a one mana play in the Foundry mechanic from reserve there. Just any one play from reserve at the point when you have a monolith out is going to be such a strong play. I think, yeah, good. It really heads up play there, just shooting off, getting rid of the thing that'll cost the lowest mana. The fewer times that Popeye is able to say after you to Cladius, the better Cladius's position will be. So, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Both players taking a minute to determine which card to put into mana orbs this turn. Popeye's math is
I know
changing a
earlier
little.
you were mentioning that you've played some Aphanas. Have you played any or much Sigismar?
No, and funny enough, I was planning to do a new YouTube series, Zero to Hero, with Sigismar, walking through using the marketplace on the beta for altered.gg. Unfortunately, that project has been delayed a little bit as the company is still waiting to put out that beta. But yeah, I am. This would be my first look into Ortis. In fact, I have a friend who loves tokens, so I have just been funneling every Ortis card I've ever opened into his hands. So I will be starting completely fresh with my Ortis collection and my Ortis gameplay.
I love that. That's pretty cool. Sigismar, one of these great decks just for picking up as a new player as well. It was well known as probably being a bit of an overpowered starter deck if you were just someone who was bashing starter decks into one another for a little while, starting out with Altered there. But we actually saw last season multiple top 16 finishes in AWOL events from people playing the Orus starter deck in the event proper.
Oh my
So I
goodness.
think, definitely just at the base level, a strong deck to be playing. And yeah, some of these upgrades that we're seeing from some of these highest end players from Altered Aces here are really, really strong. They definitely get some of the stronger ways of building these decks in this current metagame. We saw Cladius playing out another unique there, a Kakoba Legion Commander that both has a charge effect on it, that giving characters he controls one boost, but also making multiple tokens when he plays it from anywhere. Yet another super strong one, and yeah, things are looking good for him so far. One thing that is nice from Popeye still being having access to this rallying call in reserve currently. Hopefully for him, he'll be able to use that to just further, say after you, get as much information as possible, and then figure out whether he can stop the crazy amount of stats just coming out from single card in this Kakoba.
Yeah, Cladius has just been putting on a masterclass of pressure, and we see that we are now in the match point. And old Kakoba here, a 677 with upside if you're counting stats at home. In this particular matchup, we're looking at an 899 for just 4 mana. Absolutely absurd. And it scales up from there. So good to get that character off the board with a timely Tiny Jail. And we will see if Popeye here can stick the landing and prevent a progression on either side from Cladius.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was wondering for a second whether that founder mechanic was going to get played onto the hero expedition, where it just innately a little bit better at progressing, given the two stats on water that it has and needing to progress on water, or whether he was just going to choose to play that on the companion side, where there currently is nothing there for the bottom Sigismar, who really needs to prevent that progression, ends up choosing to just play it where it is better. I like that, especially because there are, cards available like Charge that we see so often from Sigismar that can just put one stat in pretty easily. So that wouldn't shore it up on its own, at least on the hero side. So that's pretty cool. That being said, I don't even think that Popeye is actually playing Charge. So in any case, I just, I think it's a solid decision. Plays well around multiple things that could come out, but also just threatening any further characters as well would pretty much lock it up in general, I believe, for Cladius.
Yeah. Popeye playing the best charge, which is a permanent charge in the Ozlith. But as we head into this next option here, I'm only seeing 2 mana from both players. And, at least to my knowledge, Popeye is unlikely to be playing the defender bureaucrat. So we might be looking at a GG from Cladius. And with this extra stats into the companion from Cladius, it definitely looks like a tall order to move forward here.
Definitely. Yeah, this is honestly coming down a little bit to just having these early uniques that just were able to cause these double advances early on. It was too much. There was no amount of little small incremental card advantage that Popeye could get that could really compensate for that without finding his own uniques to sort of counteract it, or without finding early enough removal to handle it either. I also have to say that I think it was the Ortis Trooper unique there, that being for
Hmm.
just 1 mana, even if there had been removal like teamwork training or a tiny jail, it just wouldn't have done anything. It would have been a mana efficient trade for Gladius there. So really, really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, taking that Ozlith, we want to push into the late game, but unfortunately, the pressure was just too great. So taking that turn off and allowing Gladius to get a double progression did make that almost a done deal. So we're going to head into our next game. This is TDC Chris versus Runefolk. Runefolk making another return with the Lindaway. Not on purpose, by the way. I just happened to see that they had the lowest progression at the time, but not mad to watch some more purple gameplay. So both Ysmir heroes here, having a pretty developed board, and a unique here, the Anubis, is going to be headed off the board for this turn. So we'll check back in with that if it becomes relevant. One of these cool cards from the new set, Pomola, at first wasn't feeling it. And then I got into the Withered Tree. And as Cole will let you know, moth, 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 moth. So
Yeah, I'm gonna 100% agree there on Moth Moth. It's likely that this upcoming turn we're going to see that exact Moth Moth line, likely just to open things up, prevent the best card from Lindaway's reserve from doing anything, which will be really nice to see. And 4 cards in hand for Aphas. This is one of these situations where, oftentimes you think of support abilities as being really costly from reserve, just binning a card like that in order to get some incremental advantage. But in this case, the incremental advantage is going to be two moths. So a total of 4 in stats across 2 characters, which is super nice. Plays well into removal, prevents a good play from Lindaway. Um, yeah, position just looking excellent for Afanas here with so many cards available.
Yeah, and notably, some of the effects we're typically seeing with a discard from reserve effect are things like after use, or some boosts, or even an anchored on a small character. In this particular case, when you get those tutus, not mad about that, but also some disruption against the strongest card available for the Lindway player. So, as you mentioned last time, sort of acting like a miniature Baku, causing whatever cards come out of hand to be on the chopping block as we pare down our reserve at end of turn to 2 cards once more.
Definitely. Um, we're seeing this Dorothy Gale come out again from Runefolk here. It's the one that we saw lock up the game previously, though. In this case, it looks like a desperation play. Shows that the last card in hand is a gift of self, so if there is any sabotage effect, that would just eat it, but otherwise, the Aphanis player just needs a character in order to lock up any expedition progression here, given that they have access to these Rhyme Frosts that are currently in reserve. So Runefolk forced to pass there, and we'll see if they have 1 or 2 characters. They will either progress once or twice here to lock up the game.
Instead, it looks like Aphanis might be playing with their food a little bit, having the beauty sleep on this particular turn, and opening up next turn to start with a Rhyme Frost and a Double Moth once again. So Lindway given another shot at life. It looks like Aphanis might have run out of characters in hand, but it's still anybody's game at this particular time. Afanis is only one position on the board away from match point, whereas Lindway is looking at 2 progressions before we get to that final turn.
I am just mind blown that Lindaway was able to survive that turn there.
No
With
kidding.
that number of cards, it's either going to be a really greedy list for the Aphanis that just isn't playing many characters to supplement this Nylum strategy, which, I've played around with lists like that. That can definitely happen sometimes. But otherwise, it's a very unlucky draw if they're not able to play a single one there, at least in order to take a single progression. As it stands, I think things still looking pretty good for them here. The cards that Lindaway will need to draw in order to stabilize at this point, they're going to have to be perfect to a level of just runner, really, really, really good interaction cards here. Whether they can do that, definitely possible with a deck like Lindaway, but it's going to be difficult at the same time. And yeah, I'm expecting that TDC Chris, our Aphanis player here, is also likely working with Small Step Giant Leap at this point, given the number of cards they've seen and the fact that they didn't have any characters the last turn. So, they really need to prevent any progressions here for Lindaway at least, or Lindaway needs to prevent the Aphanis from advancing in order to just avoid dying immediately.
Yep, exactly. Now we see a play that we were talking about as we started the stream. Sleight of hand coming in to bounce back our Off You Go, one of the strongest removal spells in the game, and putting in this nice Studious Disciple, which has a discard effect to make the next spell you play this turn cost 1 less. So this could give us a cheaper sleep. It could give us an Off You Go. Lindaway is essentially looking at 2 known sources of removal, and our Aphanis player here does have the mana to play both of those. So we're certainly in an uphill battle position right now. Notably, we haven't placed out our Maw yet, so Baba's Izba still could give us that after you, which might be just enough to save face on one expedition. But yeah, we're once again finding ourselves in sort of a scary position as our Lindway player.
Yeah, it's interesting that choice to pick up the off you go there instead of potential beauty sleep even. I think in a lot of cases the beauty sleep will just be, a little bit more flexible. In this case, off you go really suggesting that their plan is just to get rid of any maw or anything that could make a maw very overstated that would come out. Currently, it really definitely seems that Runefolk is playing hard off of that Maw ability.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to be so important here in order to stabilize on Expedition to maybe find even multiple sacrifices still, depending on the cards available to them in hand that are left. And Off You Go definitely helps prevent some of the more absurd Maw possibilities that can arise. So I see it. seems decent. But then it also makes me think at the same time, it could be that they're not working with any copies of Small Step Giant Leap. The risky part of Beauty Sleep there being that, if that snags them only one progression instead of the double advance, it's going to be very hard for them to win the next turn if they've used a Beauty Sleep multiple times across two expeditions. So off you go, definitely does not have that problem. And we're seeing now this mall coming out will be passing the priority back over to the Ifanis player with this After You from the Baba's Isba. But it's gonna need to be something else that's very good from Windaway in order to stabilize. I can't imagine what.
Yeah, looks like Lindaway is chucking Ma into the wood chipper to have one more chance at setting up some sort of pressure on the companion expedition, more than likely. Oh, but it looks like instead we're looking at a Moth and Runefolk offering the GG. So a double progression here from Aphanis will seal up this game. Well done by both players. Is definitely fun to watch. So thank you for the games, and we will head back to see if there are any more matches going.
Cool seeing Afanis win without having access to any spell return uniques, or at least not that we saw in play that game, at least. There weren't any in discard. There was a unique that did have an ability to draw a card, but no spell return. So, kind of nice to see. I definitely think there might be some interesting ways of building the deck now without necessarily having that specific type of unique. So that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and like I said, selfishly, as an Aphanis player, I was very happy to see the sleight of hand come in there. Would be interesting to see the entire list if there was multiple copies or if that's just the fun of one of.
Are there any other specific pet cards that you think are pretty cool at the moment in Afanis?
I've been so busy brewing with Rin that I have not gotten back into testing Aphanis very much. So I'm still waiting to pick up some of those cards from my local game store. And yeah, at the moment, we're just running Rin into a wall and seeing what sticks.
Nice.
I am heading down to one more match. I've got Gato Alterado 97 versus Thirsty Seahorse 245. We have an Akesha versus Tasia. So two more heroes that we have not seen at all tonight. Very cool. We've got a couple of big beaters here in the Demeter. This is going to be eternal as long as it's in a forest region, in which case it is. Then also this unique Dracana, which gains anchored and draws a card at noon, quite good. But a Winter Nova out of Akesha, a new just total bomb disruption piece that's going to come out. We get to choose three different modes and pick the same one multiple times. So let's see what Akesha decides to do here.
Yeah, I was about to say this Dracana in play looks super cool and super strong, but is no longer going to be a Dracana in play, I assume. Um, it should be very gone, is my expectation here. It's actually, it is possible. There is a world where they try to go for an advance on the expedition over it instead. But yeah, really cool cards coming out from both players here. Seeing this Sunisa, the rare defender, it's out of faction from Ortis, I believe. From the Izmir player currently in reserve. I think this is one of these really cool new techs that Akisha has access to for the more control styles of it, which is sweet. We saw the card earlier being played in Golrang as a unique, I believe it was,
Yeah,
which
a
is also pretty
2/2
cool.
for two stat.
Exactly. And in this case, this is just the larger version of it. No other cool effect on it. It's just a rare. But 444 for 3, definitely nothing to sneeze at. Really strong for a very defensive playstyle. Kesha that's trying to make it into these later turns. Play big cards like Winter Nova to stabilize, do some cool things in the late game.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we take a minute here to look at the discard of our Akasha player, we see some familiar faces in Rare Isatok, Rare Baba Yaga, and Rare Conjuring Seal, but also some new players in this Blizzard Rhymefost, and of course the Nova that is currently being played. So a nice mix of old and new, and just testing out some new things that Trial by Frost has allowed for us. So it looks like we got
You
a clean sweep of the characters with this Winter Nova effect, using the target player sacrifices a creature or character for each of those modes, it looks like.
Beautiful. Love that effect there as a sweeper. Seems really strong. I was just wondering, how do you feel about this rare Conjuring Seal? Typically, we've seen that card in Aphanis being played as a 2 of to draw 2 cards. for 3 mana, at least from the front side, but this rare instead costs 1 more mana, but draws you an extra card. How do you feel like that coming out of Akesha?
I definitely like it. I would be curious if it's, a one-off card that they're hoping to see, or if they're playing it in multiples. At multiples, I get a little less intrigued by it. I tend to just like the common Conjuring Seal for a quick draw. But as we're seeing, this player is interested in having things like Sunisa to still be able to play from behind and get through some big characters when they are on the back foot. So possibly looking at an Akesha list that prioritizes some of these big card advantage spells early and then sort of takes over the late game, like we saw with this previous turn of sacrificing an entire board and getting that progression.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think one of the more interesting dynamics there specifically is that if you're playing the rare version of Conjuring Seal, it is suddenly a card that you cannot ever play on the first turn of the game.
Hmm.
Um, Oftentimes it looks really bad, just or feels really bad, thinking of, okay, I'm not playing a character, I won't be able to progress at all, I can't block anything. But simply drawing a couple cards on the first turn of the game can sometimes be really strong, actually. Um, Turns out one of the really interesting dynamics with Altered is often that an expedition progression isn't equal to an expedition progression at a different point in time. Especially if you've had any experience playing a deck like Waru, for example. I think that's a deck that really specifically will teach you that lesson. If you are trading things off early, letting your opponent get multiple, even like 4 and above expeditions ahead of you early on, sometimes that'll just put you into a position where you are unable to lose another expedition for the rest of the game simply because your setup is so good. And I think that's one of the things that card advantage can sometimes give you in these Izmir strategies, as long as you're playing really tight with it and able to leverage the card advantage well. But something where other decks will often get stuck, for example, I've seen Fens do this before, just looping magical trainings repeatedly, and it feels really, really good. You're drawing a ton of cards, you're generating a ton of card advantage, but you don't do anything with it. And those games you'll often just lose to it. So I think the really interesting thing here is, that dichotomy between wanting to have a bunch of options to put yourself in these positions where you can't lose, also figuring out a way to turn the corner in a way that's actually relevant. I think it's a really cool dynamic in the game at the moment. And this is one of these strategies here, this Akesha, that really has good ways of turning the corner there. So, I like conceding some of the early value to get some of these stronger later plays. It's pretty sweet.
Absolutely. And speaking of stronger later plays, we're going to see a Dorothy Gale come in, which puts a card from hand to reserve. When you do, you can send to reserve target character with hand cost 3 or less. So in this case, we put in a Celebration Day, a mainstay from the Beyond the Gates meta in Akesha. That's going to stop progression in every expedition. So, one of these ways that we can sort of slow the game down and take our time with what we're doing. In this particular case, though, our Tasia opponent spent 2 different plays with these Ogans pumping up a single Sneezer Shroom, and this Dorothy was able to shut that down. So now we're looking at a possible double progression for the win from our Akesha player here, and Tasia has 2 more opportunities to respond. It looks like we're going to start here with the Nurture, which should bring us back into a point of safety in the Hero Expedition, but it looks like our ensign is going to be locking it down on the companion side.
Yeah, interestingly, that expedition is behind, meaning that that second clause of Sinisa's is active, meaning that it having defender is not going to prevent it from advancing here. So that is super sweet. The thing going for the Tasia player is they will keep a character around this turn in the Sneezer Shroom that does get anchored. The thing not going in their favor is, again, that their opponent is on a small step giant leap faction. So I do worry here that they might not get to play any further cards this game, but we'll see.
Yeah, that is entirely possible. And even if that's the case that they don't find one, Akesha might just take this opportunity to lay back, pop open a drink, and play the celebration day to wait for some more cards to come around. A very quick mana orb from Akesha says that we have a game plan and we are ready to stick to it. So that quite sounds like a small step, but we shall see.
And does it come out? Does the game end on the spot, or are we playing for longer?
Dorothy's going to give lose fleeting to the next card. So yeah, it looks like we're going to kick our feet up for the celebration day. No more progressions on either side. And from here, we'll just decide: does Akesha have some card draw? Asia just going to pass. There's definitely still things to be done, but certainly one of those things is not advancing on the tumult.
You know, it's really nice to see a support ability like the one we saw just get activated be really useful. And in this case, I think it's actually sort of insane. That celebration day, you know, unlike many other decks, Tasia often isn't working with any sabotage effects. You mentioned Jack Frost as a potential card that can be playing now out of Muna, but it's really rare to see that actually still in most of these configurations, which means that this celebration day is just going to go completely untouched sitting in reserve here. It's as safe as can be. Um, that's a really nice position for them to be in there, just hanging out. If the Tasia commits too much at any point, they will just threaten to say, no, nothing will happen. And otherwise, you know, they're just digging further through their deck for ways that they can win the game themselves. So, really good position for Kesha.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as we're heading into this turn, I'm going to take one more look into the discard. We see a rare Spindle Harvester out on the companion side. Um, just a really fun and eclectic mix of spells here from our Akesha player. We see that second rare Conjuring Seal, so it looks like we might be playing this in triplicate. And as we watch the Akesha player's deck dwindle down to a meager 6 cards, makes me question, how much of our top end spells are we giving a lot of variance to? Celebration Day is once again going to be shutting down progressions on all expeditions, and giving Akesha even more chances to dig through their deck and potentially find, even a singleton small step giant leap, as we saw with that Dorothy. That's a card that we could potentially remove fleeting from and get a double progression in an instant. So we will see what happens as we head into the next turn.
Yeah, it's nice seeing another one of these cool Dracana uniques coming out that does get anchored and draws a card at noon, which is really cool. Just I love the set of Dracana uniques. I think they're just a really cool card in general.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just love seeing Akesha survive up to 13 mana, and at this point they get to do whatever they like. Like they have so many cards in hand, they get access to so many more with cards like Conjuring Seal. They can even play a Conjuring Seal from reserve and then just play another Celebration Day. They have enough mana to do that. They can really do what they want. I know if you've been following altered content the last couple of weeks, we've seen Runefolk specifically on Akesha a couple times having like 20 cards in their hand in these turns.
Yes.
I do wonder if there are copies of cards like the Catagear in order to start playing these spells for free, but honestly, they don't need it either. It is nice, at least, you know, for Tasia here, if there isn't a small step giant leap found, that some threats will stick around here. Hydrocana, Demeter, yeah, good choice there, but you know, it's not going to be as nice as having a Catagear in play and a ton of free spells.
Yeah, definitely. And here we are watching some beautiful navigation from Tasia, getting that. So it's like that was headed out for a boost. Another celebration day off the rare category, as you mentioned. So once again, not progressing, but absolutely dominating the companion side is our Tasia player with multiple eternal characters that will be eternal for what is essentially the rest of the match.
Yeah, I'm just wondering at this point whether it's the case, you know, there's a world where you're not even playing Small Step Giant Leap as the Akesha player in this situation. However, otherwise, it's definitely a very high chance. If we don't see it right here pretty much immediately, I'd say it's a very likely chance that all of the Small Step Giant Leaps have found their way into mana at some point, because at this point, we've seen the entirety of the discard get shuffled back into the deck now. The
Yeah.
the Akesha should be working with every card that they have access to.
Of
I
note, a
don't
single card left on the
necessarily.
bottom of the deck
Yeah.
for the previous turn. So, unless that's the one of that was left, and here it is.
Ah, there
So,
it is. They found it, and that'll lock it up. So yeah, good showing there from the Akesha. But yeah, looked like a reasonably cool Tasia configuration as well.
yeah, absolutely. And that Tasia was coming up on time, but luckily we were able to see an end to the game there without hitting that unfortunate snag. So, my suspicion is that will be the final match of this round. And in fact, it is. We have headed directly into round 3. Any particular areas you want to go to. It looks like we've seen a lot of our team players so far, but we may have some more to go.
I would love table 3.
Table 3. All right, we will be watching Mandarin PJ versus Arthur Bacalar. And as we head into that match, have you noticed either of these players playing any particular character or heroes recently that you're looking forward to seeing?
Interestingly, I remembered Arthur Bacalar as being on something else that was not Sigismar, but I believe in this case they are playing Sigismar, which is interesting. And I know at one point Mandarin PJ, I believe it's a player who I actually lent some cards to at some point. I want to say for Tasia. I think it might have been like Tiny Gens, but it looks like in this case they're choosing to go with Fen, which is really cool. Notably, this is someone flying the flag of Australia as well. So Brazil versus
Ooh,
Australia. We haven't seen many Australian players so far, so cool to see.
indeed, I have not. That's very exciting. Some quick notes of who we are on. And if you're just joining us, we are on round 3 of AWOL Season 2, Wednesday Weekly number 3. This is a weekly tournament that you can get all of the information on at the Board Game Arena link in the description of this stream, as well as in the AWOL Discord. If you have any questions about it, please let us know in chat, and we're happy to help you there. As we head out of turn 1, it looks like a Hather was able to progress our um, Fen player, and Sigismar was able to score a double progression off of their token as well as their Baba Yaga.
Yeah, definitely seeing there, that power of that Sigismar hero ability, just getting a free expedition progression there thanks to it. So Sigismar taking an early lead on expeditions, but honestly, things looking pretty good for Fen as well. They're going to be able to repeatedly cast here this magical training if they so choose with a resupply of another Hathor to pick it up, which is super sweet. But they're going to need to start stemming the bleeding pretty quickly here, though. Also, notably, Sigismar on a good expedition for this Foundry mechanic that gets played out onto the hero side. It is on water, so that's going to be pretty hard to block. But we're just seeing that the Fen chooses to pick up with that Hathor the magical training yet again, deploys a Tanuki, sabotages away the Baba Yaga, and is going to try to shore up this companion expedition. I wonder whether or not that'll get overstated, and it does.
Wow.
Haven Warrior coming out at perfect timing.
Yeah, Rare Haven Warrior out of Sigismar, just a beautiful stat stick that can also give us a boost on our next character on that turn. So definitely a strong card there. And as our poor Tanuki retreats to the reserve, we'll have to see if we get through on our mountain region again next turn. Notably, we've pushed through both Hathors already, as you mentioned, just turning it into card draw. And that was one of the things that you mentioned earlier that, getting the card advantage in hand is very strong, but might be a little tricky to keep up with Siggy if they're able to maintain this pressure of a bunch of characters. Oof.
Definitely.
We see a
Oh,
Grand
wow.
Endeavor come out, which puts Fen into a position where they're going to want to deal with that immediately. They have the cloth cocoon to do so, which is nice, but that might sort of make their turn a little weaker. So we'll see if they're
Yeah,
able.
it's
Oh,
It
and
because of that rare Grand Endeavor, it's just so hard to deal with. It is the correct turn
mm,
for Fen to be able to just remove it immediately with Cloth Cocoon. It pays the 2 extra for the tough 2 that rare version of Grand Endeavor has, but that does equal a free progression for Sigismar. It's the sort of trade-off that you have to make here as Fen, unfortunately. If you're, from the perspective of the Fen player, you will simply lose to that card if it sticks around. If you have to deal with it the next turn instead, you will lose to a double progression. So, correct decision there. Absolutely. It's just rough. That feels bad when your opponent gets 3 expeditions ahead of you and they play a follow up like Grand Endeavor. That's super strong.
further highlighting just this absolute blitz gameplay that Sigismar has going on. Now we see Fen playing out an Ortis Night Warden unique. 3 from hand, 3 from reserve, 3/3/1 stats. When it gains a sleep, it gains 2 boosts instead of the usual one. And if you have 2 or more cards in reserve, sabotage. So snagging that Haven Warrior there, definitely a powerful way to remove some big stat stick from the board, and also has Siggy notably down to only 2 cards in hand. So this is a position where, Ben is unlikely to be happy with how the tumult is looking right now. But we might be in a position where all of our card advantage finally catches up and allows us to put in some work. Oh, but a teamwork training coming out is going to snag our unique character here. And is that a double progression for the game?
Yeah, that locks up the game immediately. That was as fast as can be from Sigismar. Some games just turn out that way, especially when you find those early double progressions into Grand Endeavor. That's often just how it goes. I did like there was a critical decision point at one point there where Mandarin did use a cloth cocoon from hand to go after the Grand Endeavor instead of the one from reserve. I think that's a really heads up play in general. Fen getting a lot of additional value out of having more and more cards in reserve when they're playing cards like Anansi, for example. That stat, will just be larger, and sometimes that will make the difference against a deck that's just going to play so many small guys like Sigismar. In this case, though, not enough.
Yeah, notably, we were only at our six mana turn there. So that's a total of 4 turns, and you need 7 progressions to win the game. So Sigismar did it in absolutely record breaking time. That was the shortest number of turns possible to make that many advances. So well played by Arthur, and a really good showing of the hero. We're going to head back to the matchups for round 3, and we'll pick a new table. I'm going to head to table 2. We've got Devicho GM versus C Curls.
Beautiful. The nice thing about a fast matchup there, from the perspective of someone commentating it, is we have plenty of time to jump fully into another matchup here. Currently seeing Sierra against Sigismar. Sea Curls on Sierra currently has a Brass Bug Hive in play, bunch of Brass Bugs in play to go with it. That's a cool start. And not too far behind on the Tumult either. Conversely, Sigismar has a reasonably strong unique that is in reserve at the moment, but also an Icebound Lake sitting in play does threaten some potential incremental advantage over the next few turns.
Yeah, do you want to read us through that unique?
Yeah, absolutely. It has from hand, if you control a token, the next card you play this turn or this afternoon costs one less. That being nice because that turns this Monolith Rune Scribe into functionally a one mana play when you play it from hand, which is great. And then when you play it from anywhere, if you have less than 8 mana orbs, you get to create a 1/1/1 Ordis Recruit in the other expedition, like an Ordis Gatekeeper. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's super nice. And as I'm sitting here looking at our Sierra, it looks like we have the common Dr. Frankenstein, common Hooked, the faction shifted Withered Tree, and still a focus on the Brass Bug Hive Rare. So a completely different configuration from what we saw in our first round, but still clearly doing very powerful things.
Yeah, loving seeing this Nylum come out in this rare form here from Sierra. I'm loving seeing Sierras in general. I know a lot of people in Axiom feeling like Traced is dead, Subash is dead, Sierra's our only choice. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. However, I definitely admit these Sierra builds look super fun. I'm here for it.
Yeah, Sierra was one of the first heroes I played in the game at all. Probably gave me one of my early distastes for Ortis playing against the starter decks against each other in that particular case. But yeah, something about getting a rare brass bug hive out, using your mechanical training to just keep on pumping out those giant bugs, and sitting back and relaxing as your engine does the work. It feels good.
I've been really impressed by this card specifically. It's being played from Sierra right now in Frozen Delivery. The synergy with this card plus Ouroboros Lyra Bastion is absolutely insane.
hmm
Really good value card in general. I think it's definitely one of the best ones that came out of the most recent set to, give some consistency and ability to dig through the deck for these Axiom lists.
Yeah, in the Beyond the Gates meta, we were really only seeing a couple of characters who could consistently turn through their entire deck and trigger that reshuffle of the discard pile. Now, in the new meta, we're seeing some additional folks gain that accolade. So, fun to watch as players just build these engines that allow them to tear through their deck, find exactly the right cards, and execute on their strategy more cleanly and robustly than they did in the first set alone. So, Trial by Frost bringing in some great pieces for that.
It's been really interesting seeing the diversity in Sigismar lists though already today. We saw some diversity between two players who were on the same team, even some choosing a bit more removal, some spending their rares on copies of Gift of Self. We saw the Sigismar player in the last matchup who took down the Fen player pretty quickly, playing Haven Warrior at rare. And in this case, I don't know what to expect. This configuration is also entirely different. Playing this Icebound Lake, Sigismar, as we've been mentioning, a hero that has such a good aggressive gameplay strategy, but Icebound Lake is a permanent that only gives you counters that eventually turn into a Dragon Shade token when you play characters in an expedition that is behind. So that's already a super interesting build. We see it paired with Sunisa at rare. I honestly don't know what to expect here, but this is a sweet build.
Yeah, pretty happy with this so far. This turn has also been crazy. We've seen several things, including a rare Frankenstein confirming the split between rare and common in this deck. Also, a sticky note seal, very timely, destroying our brass bug hub before Frankenstein could get a hold of it. And then another brass bug hub coming out of the deck for Sierra, promising an explosive next turn if you can keep it. But we see the Ortis spy come in and snipe that brass bug hub. So Sierra has lost her main source of pressure for the moment and will have to find another way to contest these expeditions to make those final two moves in order to take this match.
And yeah, Sierra are just really showing off here how they're just going to be able to dig for whatever they need this coming turn. Double Ouroboros in play. Yeah, they're going to have some pretty good selection here, just resupplying now. And that also lets them put another Brass Bug into play this turn. There is no world where they're not going to advance on the companion side, and they just need to find a single expedition more. Notably, this Jian that is currently in reserve for the Sierra as well. Typically, it's often just going to be used for that support ability to activate the abilities of this Ouroboros. However, in this case as well, it's worth noting that it is pretty good expeditions for it as well. If they did want to put it on the hero side, it does have 4 stats in water, so that would potentially be able to lock it up.
Yeah, pretty potent stats there, as you mentioned, and also notably a second unique Geon from this deck, both of which have that ability, as you mentioned. So the activate ability of target permanent you control can be used with just that simple discard from reserve. So in general, that's going to be turning into something like a 3/3 bug or an exhaust effect. Just a lot of utility in these uniques. And once again, we're seeing a player who has taken the time and effort to hunt down the uniques that work best for their strategy. So cool to see.
Yeah, this Icebound Lake, though, starting to get counters finally, and they will be able to activate it this turn if they so choose to. Plays out the Order Spy. We're onto that side as well. It is behind, gets the counter. Interested to see what else will come out from hand from the Sigismar player. But wow, showing off these mechanical trainings for the moment from Sierra. I like this here for the Sierra, especially just because they can use this to simply pass back yet again to the Sigismar, get maximum information to figure out where they want to play their stats this turn.
Yeah, obviously love the mechanical trainings even more when they're producing sweet, sweet bugs. But we'll take what we can get at this point, getting through those resources here, and hopefully seeing more action to come from Sierra this turn to get that final progression. But Siggy's looking like they're in a pretty good spot to keep this game competitive for as long as possible.
Yeah, the Sierra is highly incentivized here to avoid putting anything into play as far as characters for as long as possible because of the threat of this Icebound Lake giving it a sleep. If they're trying to win the game this turn, at least, they would much rather just wait as long as possible, play as many things that, can't fall asleep, potentially in terms of permanence, or more setup into the reserve. Currently seeing a Gibble enter reserve now from that mechanical training. But yeah, it's going to be hard to avoid playing anything out that cannot be made asleep at this point. What I would say though, interestingly, it's a situation where, they can potentially try to threaten to win the game this turn, but maybe it's also perfectly good to just set up a really strong turn for the next turn that's going to come out. If something of theirs is asleep from this Icebound Lake cracking potentially, it'll stick around for the next turn, and they're in a pretty good spot already. I would just say it's probably important for them then to find another permanent that'll give even more value than just this double Ouroboros that we're currently seeing. Um, but yeah, Sigismar working with much more limited resources at this point, so we'll see.
Sierra here, once again able to use that very prevalent discard effect for triggering a permanent, and this time we're finding a brass bug hive. We're going to elect to play that immediately, putting out a 3/3/3, um, and getting a second one off the Sierra effect. So potentially threatening end of the game here on the companion expedition. Of course, we still see the Sinisa that could shut that down and then also trigger the dragon. But we're in a spot where, we have now sort of asked our Sigismar opponent, are you willing to um, play on that side and bring out this dragon and essentially, lose this character? But there may
Yeah,
be a little trick here that we'll see in just a moment as this dragon comes out.
definitely a good setup here for Sierra, just realizing, okay, they just need to keep something around for next turn. Brassbug Hive is definitely the sort of something you're going to likely want to keep around, and a lot of the things will synergize with having that permanent in play. But yeah, Sigismar then just, choosing, yep, that's the turn to pop this Icebound Lake. And we are definitely going to see the expeditions close here. Both players are going to be adjacent. So game will likely end either the next turn or potentially go to a tiebreaker arena. I'm interested to see which of their own characters, though, that they're going to choose to sleep here off of this Icebound Lake.
Exactly. So being able to asleep your own characters there, if folks weren't aware of that ability on the Icebound Lake. And in fact, we are keeping the dragon. I did not actually realize that the Sinisa brings along its own Ordis recruit. So that is enough to take both expeditions and start the next turn with the 5/5. So very powerful.
Yeah, I think the real question mark here is, does Sierra have something along the lines of a mechanical training or something that they can use to start getting more activations of this Brassbug Hive that is currently sitting in play? I think that's going to be the critical dynamic here. If not, they're going to struggle to overpower a Dragon Shade, so they're going to be forced to play onto the hero side otherwise as well, instead of even contesting the companion side. So we'll see. Definitely could go either way here.
Yeah, and I'm noticing an uptick in sticky note seals as we start to see more and more powerful late game threats deployed by some of the different characters in this meta. Would you expect three sticky note seals out of a Sigismar player at this particular time?
At this point, I would not. I think that card has fallen more and more out of favor in general. It being a common, I think, is the thing that the card has best going for it. As it stands, though, Sigismar has a ton of removal options that are all reasonably solid. I mean, there were even some cards being tested, like Break the Ice, which I think was also really cool. But even at common, we have Tiny Jail, we have the rare Tiny Jail, which is likely even better. Teamwork training. There's tons of removal. In general, it really will just come down to, though, on how worried are you about big permanents specifically. The more Lyra festivals that are in your metagame, the more sticky note seals you're going to want to put in your deck.
Yeah, and what we were seeing last week was a lot of Kojo and Tasia in particular, and potentially, more meta development since then that I have not been privy to. But yeah, I tend to agree with you that sticky note seals in triplicate would be a pretty bold take in any metagame, but particularly this one right now, as we're still sort of getting our sea legs under us in this meta.
Definitely. I like the heads up play coming from the Sierra here. Plays the Gibble onto the companion side and then just kill on bursts away that Dragon Shade, essentially saying, like, yeah, you can take me down on this hero side if you have more things and more removal that you want to fire off, for example, onto that side. But in that case, we will be going to the tiebreaker arena where Gibble has that support ability to activate the abilities of this Brassbug Hive to generate another robot or potentially to just look at more cards with Ouroboros. So that's definitely a good spot to be in, unless Sigismar might have a sabotage to deny that game plan.
Yeah, and even if we're not using directly the Discardability. Having a Gibble for a 5/5 plus the 3/3 brass bug doesn't hurt either. Looks like that teamwork training is going to seal the deal in bringing us to the final arena. And
Didn't
with
expect this one to actually get to arena at the point where the Sierra was multiple expeditions ahead there, but, makes sense. That Icebound Lake, I believe it was, does
Mhm,
definitely helps a lot to shore things up when they are playing from behind like that, and they definitely had the correct timing to activate it as well. So, cool arena that we're in. Sierra working with a couple more cards at this point likely, but, still could go either way.
definitely. At the moment, with Sierra up a card, and let's just call it a couple of onboard resources, Siggy does have their hands full, but as we've seen with how quickly they were able to progress and keep the Sierra on their toes, we might still be in a position where Siggy pulls this one out.
Yeah, they likely will need to find, though, some form, I was gonna say, of sabotage in order to have any chance at this one.
Sabotage here is
Um,
fantastic.
so important given how well this deck plays from reserve. Oh, but Sierra beautifully has a kill on elemental from hand, putting a card into reserve, just saying, I will do this again, having an Inari to do the exact same effect. That's going to be really hard to overpower. I'm wondering, though, whether Sierra is going to try to play around potential removal and simply wait a little bit longer before choosing what to do with the Inari there. But interestingly, I like the choice here. They're going to activate the Ouroboros ability instead of the Brassbug Hive ability. Instead of putting stats into play, they were just looking for more things to play. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, that was not my first line of thinking on that play, but ultimately, paying off hard here. Sierra definitely knows their deck and had access to an absolutely crucial top deck there with that Brass Bug Hive. Notably, both Brass Bug Hives feeding off of each other for double 1/1 counters on our Brass Bug. So even with a singular piece of removal, it would not be enough to help Sigismar fight their way out of it. So very well played by Sea Curls on Sierra, and well done by both players.
Yeah, that's a 3-0 for you Axiom fans out there. That faction is not dead.
Not even in the slightest. And of course, coming in with both of those Sierra players. So cool to see, the scales tip in the other direction. The theming, of course, for Trial by Frost being a lot of ice, kind of moving things into a slower game plan, and Sierra is really thriving in that position. All right, so we are getting
Trying to
close to
see
the
if
end
there's
here.
any Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's any matches that have any life to them still.
It doesn't look to be the case, but I'm going to head to table 18, A.W.O.L versus Insane 94, and see if we can catch the tail end of whatever they're doing here. All right, and it looks like we're seeing yet another Sierra versus an Aphanis this time, both players on match point, and a robust board state from Sierra.
Yeah, interestingly, we do see an exhausted Katagarin Mage Dancer in reserve for Aphanis. Mage Dancer, one of these cards that you most want to play from reserve again and again. So good. But yeah, it being exhausted definitely helps prevent that gameplay plan from taking off. Nylum, Withered Tree being really good in those instances to prevent that sort of thing. And synergizes well with that Sierra Hero ability as well.
Yeah, I've been seeing a little bit more of a pivot to the rare Aphanis, or sorry, the rare Mage Dancer in Aphanis. Always cool to see what kind of rares Aphanis tries to fit into their package. You're going to typically see rare magical trainings in a lot of decks, as well as the rare beauty sleeps and the rare helping hands out of faction. But from there, it gets a little bit more questionable based on whatever meta they're in. Could you speak a little bit to how Katagir and Mage Dancer rares are doing in the current setup with Trial by Frost cards in the mix?
It's really interesting because I do think a lot of things depend on your unique configuration for the Aphanis deck in general. In general, the more card advantage that you're expecting your uniques to generate you, the less you're going to be reliant on a rare category and mage dancer. I think almost even more interestingly, I think just in general, the common mage dancer is so, so good at common already, and
Hmm.
sometimes I think you'll often bait yourself as an Aphanis player while playing the rare, trying to get that 3 boosts onto it instead of playing a little bit more distributed across different characters that you have, and sometimes that will actually lose you critical spots if you're really just trying to greed for the extra card draw. I think almost more interestingly, though, we have the dichotomy between rare Baba Yaga and common Baba Yaga. I would
Hmm.
say this matchup specifically that we're seeing, Sierra versus Afanas, is the one where having common Baba Yaga feels at its absolute worst. Baba Yaga going from maybe your best opening play and on Afanas, just playing it out turn one, picking up another card and saying, "Yep, that was pretty good, and I'm likely to advance or at least block an expedition." Suddenly, just your opponent plays a Lyra Bastion, the Ouroboros, and overstats you on the 2/1/2 common Baba Yaga, and you feel like you lose the game on the spot. Um, it's not super fun, and playing the rare, just completely different. You will win that interaction, it's good.
Yep.
Interesting dynamics to see, and I think it also depends on the matchups you're expecting to see as well.
For sure. Well, enough nerding out by us Afanis fans. It looks like we're headed into the arena for the final turn. This Baba Yaga went the distance, fully supported by a slew of spells to overcome two brass bugs. And now we are looking at two spycrafts from that Afanis. We're able to clear Sierra out of any cards in reserve. So Sierra on fumes, but with access to the brass bug as well as the potential for activating their withered tree for another moth. Meanwhile, Aphanis has their pick of the litter on a bunch of their rare cards in deck. We're probably going to see one character, one spell saved, which will give them a lot of mobility coming into this next turn. So, Aphanis deciding on the Mage Dancer and the Beauty Sleep, and taking the first uh, action this turn is going to mean that they're probably going to slam out this mage dancer, protect it from any sort of triggering effect that's going to let that withered tree prevent it from coming out, and we'll just see if we can ride it all the way to victory off some spells.
Yeah, I love the choice of not trying to go greedy with something like Helping Hand there, just having cheap stats plus removal.
Oof.
Really, really good in these slots. Avalanche coming out immediately, but that's not going to play particularly well into any further characters that are likely to come out from Aphanis here, and they have found one in a second copy of
Oh
Category
my
Mage Dancer,
goodness.
which is excellent. That being said, Nylum Withered Tree does give potential life if this card is sort of a blank from Aphanas here. Multiple moths coming out now to block, and that is 6 stats that the Aphanas will have to. No, I'm sorry, 10
Eight.
stats that the
Oh, excuse me. Yeah,
yeah,
10.
that the Aphanas will have to beat thanks to the both the Sierra Hero ability and Brassbug Hive already in play.
Yeah.
Conjuring Seal, definitely a good
If
start though, but these 2 cards have better be good.
they need to be double removal, I believe. If we do not see that here, then we are in deep trouble. A magical training is
Magical
a good
training is excellent
start.
as well.
Yep, we still have the out of our beauty sleep from hand, beauty sleep from reserve. Potentially even looking at magical training back. So 2 mana remaining. Any removal spell will seal the deal.
We're being informed, by the way, that we have not been looking at the game.
Oh my gosh! I'm so sorry, everybody. AWOL gameplay back up. Well, sometimes AWOL radio is going to have to be the next move here, I think. All right, so a second
Spoiler
a
alert,
second helping hand.
Athana's found perfect cards to,
Good
despite not having
grief.
any removal there, narrowly outstat, multiple moths, Moth, by the way, Cole, and multiple brass bugs, so with a single category Mage Dancer. Yep,
Well,
went the distance.
my casting mistake has led to the hypest chat I've ever seen on a BGA game. So love to see all the participation. Sorry everybody for the delay in video, especially on the hypest end to a game I've seen in a hot minute. A.W.O.L playing to their outs and absolutely finding them. What a cool way to end this game! And congratulations to our Afanas player here for the nuts.
Oh, Blue saying that he felt like he knew what was happening just from the audio. That means, we're painting a beautiful picture here. Yeah,
I
especially
love
with
to
this
hear that.
Navenka picture you've given me. I love painting for you guys.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are headed into round four of the season two Altered Weekly Online League Wednesday matches. Starting to see some familiar names from earlier rounds floating to the top tables in our fourth round. I am interested in table one. We have TDC Chris against Hyper K 888.
Cool, let's do it. If I
Now,
remember correctly, Hyper K won. Was it AWOL last week? Even playing, I want to say an entirely Beyond the Gates Tasia build.
that sounds correct. Have to check the tape. The final match was definitely a Kojo versus Tasia. It felt like the
Yes,
15th match of the
it
evening of
was.
that exact configuration. But here, yep, we're seeing a Tasia. And indeed, this unique Muna Druid looks a little familiar. Up to one target character gains a sleep and two boosts from anywhere. So, good start here. Looking like they're choosing not to asleep their character there. Seems like a pretty fair outcome on the first turn of the game. And a Pomola coming out of the Aphanis player means that we will see a progression on each side here.
Yeah, nice. And I can confirm this is indeed the same list, or at least this is a Beyond the Gates Tasia. There are no cards from Trial by Frost featuring in this deck at the moment. So, in case you have also been missing Trial by Frost cards, you can still play competitive Altered. This deck did awesome last week with a 6-0 finish. And yeah, looking to be doing pretty solid here so far as well.
Yeah, definitely a strong start, and cool to see someone continuing to succeed despite, you know, not messing around with the new cards yet. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Opener looking great here for Afanas, especially if they have the off you go, which they do to take
Yep.
down this aloe vera. This is oppressive Afanas gameplay at its finest. Having such a strong unique like this Muna Druid that we did see immediately out of this Tasia, it's no more thanks to the Tooth Fairy, and preventing any potential card advantage from being generated back by Tasia is the removal there at a critical timing. So that's really nice.
Yeah, dropping two cards from reserve is a little bit tough, but when the outcome is as powerful as stopping your opponent's play and also getting that early sabotage, you're kind of asking the same questions of your opponent of how well you're going to perform with no resources left. And Afanis is more than happy to help you get to that game position to make you answer it.
Yeah, I'm wondering here whether the Tasia is going to try to play again this aloe vera before it could be potentially prevented from being played by this Pomola that is currently
Mhm.
in reserve for the Aphanis, and they are choosing to do so.
And we go for the anchored, which means that we'll have limited additional plays this turn. But if this is able to stick, then we are sitting in a very nice place.
Yeah, I'm wondering, chances are here that Aphanis is either going to find a double advance or a single advance plus set up like an anchored character for the next turn. And it does look like they're going to try to outstat on one side, and presumably they'll have the character to take the companion side as well. But at least for the moment, this aloe vera is looking to also advance on their own expedition. So that is at least nice for them, a bit of a consolation, and they will have some more card advantage to work with the next turn. That sticking around is going to be nice as well. They're going to be on the water expedition, so likely to be able to advance the next turn with it if it sticks around then as well.
Yeah, a really nice positioning there. You always hate to see when you have something like an anchored character or just a configuration of cards in hand where you're like, I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this single symbol expedition or progression on the tumult. I've definitely found myself there a couple of times with my Lyra and Muna characters in the past. But this will not be the case for our aloe vera here. Very strong starting out in this position, even though they are down two spaces on the tumult at this time.
The thing I worry about here from the Tasia's perspective, other than being 2 expeditions down already though, is the fact that seeing the card Sleight of Hand and the Pomola that was already played, I'm assuming that my opponent Afanas is on an Nihilum build. And of course, players at this point will also have access to the deck lists through BGA, so they will know. And that does make a card like Aloe Vera a lot weaker when the card that you're going to be able to resupply at noon could potentially just get eaten functionally by a Nihilum right away. Um, but yeah, so we'll see whether that factors in. But for the time being, it looks like it's just going to be a sleight of hand to start off the turn. So Muna Caregiver, really nice resupply there. It's not going to get eaten just yet.
Yep, and immediately going to snap off and save our aloe vera for one more turn. Ooh, and followed up with a Mona Bastion means that our Afanis player might have a little bit more trouble as we head through the rest of this game at spot removing sticky threats. So they will have to rely on multiple spells, pumping up their stats enough to keep on taking progressions in the face of a sticky board from Tasia.
Yeah, I think the thing that this Siphonis definitely has going for them here, even in the face of the Spindle, is that one, they've already made good use of removal this game and the off you go
Mhm.
that they've already played. So they're like, hopefully, from their perspective, they're not working with a bunch of removal in hand that's functionally dead at this point. Cards like Magical Training are going to be at an all-time premium for them. Helping Hand is going to be always awesome, and this combination of cards with this exhaust game plan are still going to work just fine. You can target things in reserve, no problem. Those don't have tough. Just things in play do.
Yep.
So I think much of this Aphanis game plan is going to be unhampered by the spindle, as long as they don't happen to draw like in a row, beauty sleep, off you go, that sort of thing.
Yep. As long as we can keep those threats flowing here, we should be okay. And heading into a very strong Tasia turn here with two characters already available and a Baba Yaga from Aphanis might be able to work our way up on this hero side if I had to guess.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, the good threat there, at least with the Baba Yaga, it's a discount play, and with just a single spell cast, you are getting above that 3 forest stat that the aloe vera has, so you would threaten in advance. At the same time, though, yeah, lots of strong plays that can come out. Another aloe vera from Tasia, definitely a good one.
Hmm.
But, I'm wondering what the options here are going to be for Afanas. Beauty Sleep, actually, as removal here, could be really excellent, but Ogun is even going to prevent that from being a thing for this turn. That's a really strong setup turn for the Tasia. Love that position.
Yeah, you're
And
not
yeah, just
kidding.
having that spindle for extra insulation, so
Yeah, it would not even surprise me to see a Faunus just pass here if they don't have any sort of spell that's going to gain them some advantage, and just watch as Tasia. Yeah, here we go. So Tasia's immediately going to crawl back. Who was ever behind on the tumult? Not us. We are officially back in business and with multiple very strong anchored characters to start our turn as well. Um, Faunus has their work cut out for them here.
yeah, definitely. That was definitely a solid comeback swing, and just the fact that this aloe vera plus spindle harvesters are going to give such access to cards in reserve as well. Of course, Iphanis will likely be able to interact with at least one of those cards, I would assume. But it's going to help let them do things this turn. They're not going to be in a position where they just don't have cards to play, which is excellent. Especially in these later stages of the game. At this point, yeah, it's critical. So
Yeah.
definitely good position for Tasia, I would say. But Afanas, working with a ton of cards in hand. We've seen a good amount of card draw come out this game already. I'm interested just looking at the list for the Afanas. They are playing 3 copies of the Nylum Withered Tree, and just the
Okay.
fact that they haven't found one to deploy thus far, and the deck's truly built around it as well, it's
Hmm.
definitely going to make it a lot harder in spots like this. And interestingly, they're also not choosing to play any copies of Moth to a Flame, which I do think is really interesting, actually, given how it is just a common and such a strong one at that. But they are working with a solid cast otherwise, especially if things that can interact with that reserve. We have Rhyme Frost as a 3 of. We have 3 Tooth Fairies. There's all the full set of Pomola as well. So I definitely expect that not all of these things from reserve will be able to be played this turn from the Tasia.
Yeah, Tasia definitely has their fill here, but as you mentioned, any sort of disruption for the reserve is going to be pretty powerful here. Now, you mentioned you're looking at the Ephanis list. Are they also, do they have the back pocket out here of finding their small step giant leaps?
There is a single one in the deck. I
Single
definitely
copy.
think that yeah, in these Nihilum lists, especially the ones that are more and more heavily built around it being a 3 of, I definitely understand why they're going down on the copies of Small Step to enable that. It is one of these things where Ephanis can sometimes simply die when you're playing 3 copies of Small Step Giant Leap by drawing 2 of them in a single turn on like turn 2 of the game. You can sometimes just lose the game to it. It's critical.
Hmm.
Sometimes it does happen. Nihilum suffers from that a lot less. If you on turn 2 draw 2 copies of Nihilum, you're like, "Oh, this is super sweet." Um, so there's definitely a big difference there, but it also does become one of these things where in the later stages of the game, if you need to find some combination of characters and spells, Nihilum doesn't truly count as a character in that way, I guess, as well, or at least doesn't pair as easily with a spell so quickly. And if you draw that in a combination with Small Step, also not necessarily the best. So it does make sense that that's one of the cards you might be trimming if you're trying to play that full set of Nihilum.
Yeah, definitely. So much to consider. As soon as you add a new engine like that, really, it feels like the deck building possibilities are endless. I was very concerned here for a second that we were about to miss the final turn of the game on Tasia advancing double, but the sleep on the Spindle Harvester has given Afanis yet another chance to play through and find some of these disruptive elements and rebuild that board that we are hoping to see.
Yeah, really notable that the Spindle Munibastion isn't exactly necessarily game ending against removal. It just makes it a lot harder to work efficiently. Beauty Sleep for 3 mana, though, in some of these later stages of the game can still be enough, especially with a lot of the plays that come out like from a deck like Tasia are at 3 mana. Ends up being mana neutral, not that bad. Um, But yeah, I'm wondering here now at this point, this turn, I'm expecting that a lot of the power that comes out from Ephanis, it will have to be not in the form of removal, given just the amount of stats we're seeing in so many different characters at this point. It's well split across the team for Tasia.
Yeah, Tasia is building that board deep right now, and at any chance could easily pivot into going wide into the Hero Expedition as well. But a beauty sleep, oof, go and turn off one of these Baba Yagas, and things that makes things a little bit more difficult to move forward here for Afanis. And it looks like Afanis
Yeah,
is going to close out their turn here, which means that Artesia is going to advance and prove once again that Beyond the Gates too strong. Plenty of power coming out of the original set to keep our players in the top tables of this particular tournament.
yeah,
For
Hyper
those of
K just crushing again and again with this Tasia build.
Absolutely. So, if you have just joined us since the last round, I am Jalix at the Tabletop Tinker on YouTube, joined today by Keelan Guy for the Altered Weekly Online League, Season 2, Week 3, Wednesday. We are going to head back into another match here in just a second. But yeah, what are your impressions so far based on what we've seen? I think we're close to two-thirds of the characters, or two-thirds of the heroes, rather, for the entire game represented in tonight's stream matches alone, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we've seen multiple heroes from both Lyra and from Muna still. I think we've been missing Arjun, Rin, Orak, and Nevenka still. But definitely maybe some time to see those still. Just wondering whether any of them are at the top tables or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sigismar out in droves, it seems, doing really well. We're seeing some Faunus, but not in the quantities that I think a lot of people have been necessarily expecting in the top tables. It's looking good, just not like dominant, is what I would say.
Yeah, plenty of meta disruption going on to keep Afanis at the top, but still in hot contest with some of the new contenders. I'm going to flip over to table 8, where we see Mebibite and Impuissant playing currently. And we have some Afanis versus Fen. So Repeat offenders for coverage tonight, but happy to see these decks both putting on a show. Fen has deployed a good cast of characters here. It looks like all set one so far, except for this Nisei unique that just left last turn. And now we have the aloe vera that has just been taken out by an off you go. So
Heads up, I
dynamic
think we're
stuff
about
happening.
to see a festival win right here.
Oh, is that right?
I have a feeling. That is my guess.
Defanis, let's see what you can do.
Just wanted to call that one before it comes out here. I saw the card Silent Night in the discard for Fen, and I
Ah,
got
okay.
very, very excited. Silent Night, super cool one that hasn't really found much life outside of festival builds yet. It's a 1 mana spell for with fleeting. You get to target a character, then roll a die. On a 4 plus, it gains anchored, and 1 through 3, it gets asleep. Definitely marries really well with the rare copy of Lyra Festival from Lyra, which lets you put your choice of anchored, fleeting, or asleep onto a character when you play it, which they're going to do right now to give anchored to something, and that should lock it up for them.
The shot was called, and we found the win. Nice work deducing that game state there, Keelan guy. Afanis probably just looking on in dread and trying to decide if they have any 0 mana outs in their hand, but it does not look to be the case. Lyra Festival is going to wrap this one up in a tight little bow with plenty of characters on board. Very cool way to watch the game end there. Uh,
It was it was hard to note jumping in just exactly what was happening, but it did appear that the Fen player was able to completely play around any potential removal that could hit the card Lyra Festival itself, but also had the ability to dodge a single removal spell on a character just by being able to put in 2 characters with fleeting, 2 characters with anchored, and 2 characters with asleep as well, depending on whatever they needed and whatever else got removed. So that was a really nice setup they had there.
yeah, no kidding. Um, that was cool to watch. Oh, it looks like table 11 still has a lot of life left in them, so we'll flip over there.
Ooh.
That's below a 2 by 4 and Caio Marquez.
Oh, interesting. You know, when I see games that still have this much progression to go with with this much time left in the round or very little, I would
Mhm.
typically assume that there's something like a Kesha going on or something funky. But no, we're seeing a Sigismar battle. It's interesting.
Yeah, it looks like some very methodical gameplay going on here. Oh, also a cool Ozma unique. You can't ban all of them. From reserve, if you control a token, draw a card, and then also will allow a cheaper bureaucrat from discard from reserve effect. So nice, nice little piece there. Haven't seen an Ozma unique in quite some time. But now that you're not allowed to run the commons or rares, that's a card that gains a lot more appeal as something that's not getting in the way of your normal 3 ofs that you want to run in your deck.
Yeah, there are some good Ozma uniques out there, and I'm starting to have the feeling like that I miss this card. I used to see it all the time, every game
Mhm.
against Sigismar. Now it's really rare to see. So cool seeing a unique one coming out there, even if maybe not like the highest tier Sigismar uniques. But but yeah, um, interesting. We're seeing a Gift of Self build for the bottom Sigismar here versus again what looks like a ton of removal spells and Rare Ordis Attorney as a bureaucrat to be played from the top of Hannes. I'm sorry, Sigismar, not Hannes. What am I
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, a lot of gift of selves in tonight's gameplay from both our Ortis and our Ysmir players. I think that's
Yeah, it's true. We did see it out of Lindaway earlier. I can't help but feel like it does play better in Lindaway than it does in Sigismar, just on the basis of it being common helps so much in a deck that it's already starved for rare slots,
yeah.
like Sigismar. But you know, there's definitely some reason to be playing it in Siggy as well, or just being a faction that definitely can leverage card advantage really well, especially based on how cheap some of the removal options are and how many good one cost plays the faction has.
Yeah, sometimes you just want to draw two cards, and it looks like from the makeup of our discard for Kaio, we have four rares here, and two of them pretty typical in Baba Yaga and Ortis Attorney, two a little more unique in Foundry Mechanic and Gift of Self. So kind of helps highlight what else the deck might be about here. But we head into our 8 mana turn with a Baba Yaga play from Kaio and significant card advantage on this side, as well as tied in the tumult. So lots more game to be had here.
Yeah, I would say, looking pretty good for bottom Siggy, having, just the card advantage at this stage. They're going to need to catch, I'm sorry, the top Sigismar is going to need to catch up a little bit on that there. Even if they're able to stabilize this turn, if it's going to cost them multiple cards without finding more card draw or able to put something in play that sort of breaks the dynamic, potentially like the Monolith or Bastion, something like that they could use potentially in order to climb back a little bit there. But otherwise, they're currently just sort of being buried under the weight of Baba Yagas plus Ortis Attorneys. The value that those cards generate is being really good in these later stages of the game. But they do have something that does break the dynamic some. They're conceding a double expedition advance this turn in order to deploy a grand endeavor. Functionally, that means they're just advancing on one side to their opponent's two, but they are going to have multiple ways in order to win. Just involving stalling the game from here. It's just going to be a tough ask given that their opponent is adjacent.
Yeah, a tricky spot to be in for our top Siggy, I think. As you mentioned, getting the progression there. They're asked to play defense on a much shorter hand and reserve, so might be a little tricky here. And of course, if the bottom Siggy is able to find a sticky note seal, they would sort of have to concede a lot of the action on their turn as well, but could handle that secondary progression from Grand Endeavor. So interesting spot to be in here for both players. But yeah, I mean, the work is cut out for below a 2x4 in the top here. And it looks like they've been, or they're a little down on clock right now as well. So might have been put into some tough spots earlier in the game too. Hard to tell.
Yeah, definitely. In this case, the Grand Endeavor being very much a desperation play there, recognizing that there's, no other characters they can play that won't just be beaten by more card advantage worth of characters in this case. I think it was interesting to note that the bottom Siggy did choose to discard down the Ortis Trooper for 1 mana, being so stat efficient in favor of just having Ortis Attorney plus Baba Yaga there still, potentially for exactly this sort of dynamic, fighting a little better against the stats of a card like Ortis Spy specifically. But, interesting choice there. I can't help but feel like the 1 mana play is just going to be so strong in these late game scenarios where they're already ahead of on card advantage. But, as it stands, things are looking very good for them here. I think likely they can just play out the cards from reserve, and that might be enough in order to take it on its own. But if they have anything else in hand, which I definitely expect to see as well, potentially teamwork training, something like that, that would seal the deal for sure.
Yep. It looks like we were just able to block on the companion expedition, but yeah, just too many cards to overcome from our bottom Siggy player. So Caio Marquez is going to proceed here and score their final point for the match. We didn't get a chance to look at this Assembly Overseer too hard, but it looked like it created double soldiers in their expedition and some card draw on the back end as well. So a pretty cool, unique to see. Um, Yep, here we go for the Aegean effect.
Yeah,
And
there we
that'll
go.
wrap up that round. So
Kyle
we'll head,
Marquez taking it.
yeah,
And
pretty.
I believe that brings us into round five.
Oh, are we already up? Getting back to the
Yep,
main
that was the
page.
last one.
Fantastic. All right. Well,
If you're
as
I would
go ahead.
love to take the opportunity here for to go into one of the lower standings matches. Given that the last one, we would love to see the finals, see the undefeated players. But this might be our last chance to see some of the more fun decks that have been brought to the event.
Yeah, I think everybody through the top five tables, except for two players, have already been on coverage this evening. So yeah, let's go ahead and head into one of the lower matches here and just see what folks are cooking with. Does anybody in particular stand out to you?
Yeah, I'm wondering, do you wanna go bully kohlrabi with me?
Oh, absolutely.
Alright, in that case, we are table 18.
Table. Perfect. All right, so pulling up this table now, and as we head over to the gameplay screen, see that it has frozen on game art once again.
Yes, indeed, I'm also still loading.
I think this is the board game
Ah,
arena hard at work checking in about premium, if I had to guess at this moment, making it hard to
yeah,
go in
that's
as a
true.
caster.
Could be.
Support your
I
local
think
board
also
game arena.
sometimes when people are still looking at their opening hands as well, it also does the same thing.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
but, yeah, definitely true. Support your local board game arena. Definitely agree with that. A lot of us not having local game stores to play Altered at, so Board Game Arena being the best option for us. So happy the service is there. Hoping that it stays alive today for this and then the final round. We've been having a lot of service stability issues in some other tournaments the last couple weeks, so it'll be
Oh,
nice if it sticks around for us here.
yeah, fingers crossed. I've had a couple of issues so far with the loading there, but this was the first one that stuck for a while. So, but we are officially into the match and getting to Bully Cole in real time. In this particular case, we see Sigismar versus Tasia, and a start to the turn of an Ortis Cadets versus a
Hey,
very
this
spike
Mowgli
statted
unique
Mowgli.
is really cool. Yeah. Interestingly, normally that would look like an actual restriction, needing one or more boosts in order to draw a card when it leaves the expedition zone. But thanks to that Tasia ability, it just turns us into a really nice Baba Yaga on turn one. So that's pretty sweet.
They call this a combo deck. I've got a at dusk draw a card Mowgli that is one of my favorite cards to play in Mona for sure. So cool to see a kindred spirit here.
And my Muna decks I used to run mostly Argent Festival specifically. I
Mhm.
also had some pretty cool Mowgli uniques for that. So definitely cool card for uniques in general. Um, but yeah, the spike stats that are sort of innate to Mowgli definitely make it a really interesting card to be playing. Um, but yeah, looking pretty good here so far. Threatening to again and again draw cards here while it lasts. That's going to be a pretty good start. Interestingly, Sigismar was not able to find a double advance through it on turn one, despite just having the single point in the water stat line, because the card Sigismar was working with was an Ordis Cadets. So yeah, that also giving him just the 1 point in water from the Ordis Recruit that Cadets generates. And
Yep.
yeah, in this case, Chiron looking pretty good as well, but it does get blocked on the companion side by a Jack Frost, so won't take a double advance this turn, but at least single advance, still pretty good for Cole, who's generating card advantage.
Yep, the single advance feels good, and that one counter from Chiron was enough to yet again bully a block out of the Sigismar player here. So we are even on the tumult at this time, and Mowgli has done his job of getting a couple more cards in hand. So good place to be for Cole.
I do think it's really interesting seeing like just uniques in general, the sort of uniques that you're looking to really just play on turn one during a game versus more like setup uniques that you're looking to combo or like synergize with other uniques sort of in the mid stages of the game. And yeah, this Mowgli definitely at its best in these early turns. So yeah, having it at the right timing there, really good for our Tasia player. Sigismar, still even on expeditions, is going to concede this turn to play a Monolith or Bastion. So their subsequent turns are going to look a lot stronger unless Tasia finds removal here.
Yeah, and definitely within the realm of possibility for removal plus the advance. But if not, then we take the double progression where we can get it and hope to cling to that lead as the monolith slowly takes over. Ooh, you love to see it. It's a Yeti coming in asleep from hand. This is going to give every other character that joins your expeditions one boost while it's in play. So, not a huge threat on the first turn, but definitely going to provide some value throughout this next turn. Cole scores the single progression for the previous turn. And if you want a way to put in some pressure against a monolith, build a chunky furry monolith of your own. Yeti will do that for you.
Definitely. Blue noting in the chat, screen needs to be maximized. Ooh. This is why I'm happy that I'm not on production today.
Right here. Blue,
But
I'm
yeah,
showing screen is
interestingly,
maximized.
oh,
See,
strange.
there we
I
go.
think that Cole last turn could have played out the Yeti and Spindle Harvesters in a different order there, um, which would have at least let the Spindle Harvesters, it being the rare, have that at noon effect or resupply. So I believe there was a potentially missed value in terms of an additional card that Cole would have had access to. Of course, he's not exactly at a loss for value at the moment, having multiple cards more access at the moment than the Sigismar player, but Sigismar is going to be leveraging the cards that they do have at this point a little bit better thanks to that monolith sitting in play. And, any additional card that could be resupplied there is potentially critical removal for the monolith, even. So that could definitely be important, but we'll see. I'm definitely waiting to see here, though, if Cole has some way of potentially anchoring any of his characters that are currently in play or start setting up for a next turn.
A little technical difficulty on the screen there. Apologies, guys. If anything happens with that again, let me know. Um, but yeah, I mean, Cole still putting in some pressure here. It looks like we've added this Muna Druid to the Hero Expedition, and currently looking at double progression, but still plenty of mana to work with from Siggy.
Yeah, just so many tokens in play at the moment from Sigismar, really just showing off what the monolith can do.
Mhm.
And yeah, I do think, this turn's still looking pretty good stats wise for Cole, but yeah, critical removal is going to become super important here immediately. Notably, without finding any way of like potentially beauty sleeping his own character or something. Yes, which I
Here we
believe he will
go.
do. Potentially going after an opponent's character still. No, he's going on his own Yeti. I love that choice. That will let him keep fighting against the monolith at the moment. He's still ahead on expeditions. Like that play a lot, so that was a good one.
The building of the big furry monolith continues.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a big furry monolith that also adds its own stats on this turn, which is what's going to be really nice here. Definitely giving him a leg up on this turn already. And holding on to this Muna Druid in reserve means that if the Sigismar doesn't find removal, it's going to likely stick around for longer as well.
Yeah, I mean, both players showing up with a respectable threat as we're heading in. Oh, notably, we've got there we go. I thought I'd missed a mana orb there. I thought Cole was just going full tilts, trying to play as many cards as possible, but looks like some more measured gameplay will be the trick for this turn. But yeah, once again, as you mentioned, this Ortis Gatekeeper just providing the maximum amount of stats for 3 mana as Ozolith helps pump all of those characters up.
Yeah, Gatekeeper being an excellent play here because Cole is so incentivized to just stat stack on one side. And the Gatekeeper does a really good job of just splitting the opening play into both sides and blocking really well. Cole does find removal in the form of Lost in the Woods for this monolith now, so subsequent turns it will look better for him. I definitely think there's a chance here that the Sigismar player might have found removal then for this Yeti. Does have enough characters in play for something like a teamwork training to hit it, but whether or not they choose to do so at this point is still up in the air. I could imagine it coming down as the last card as well this turn, but we'll see. I think it was also interesting choosing to keep the beauty sleep around here, really saying that Cole is likely wanting to hit his own characters with that as much as possible. Keep his stuff around as a pseudo anchor, even when anchor doesn't do the trick. But he's going to need at least one more character here in order to not lose a double progression this turn.
Yeah, definitely has an option for Siggy to get the double progression and officially lead on the tumult. But still a couple cards for Cole to work his way through this turn. Another of these Muna Druids, um, along with the Tasia boost, is going to contest the hero expedition here. But as you mentioned, a teamwork training would be quite timely here to take out the Yeti with that anchor and just knock out some value for Cole.
Yeah, it would be a good question though whether a teamwork training would want to go after the Yeti or just knock down the Immunodruid that was played and take the double progression there. And in this case,
Yeah.
he won't have to use a teamwork training for something like that. Instead, just plays out another character to take a double progression. But I do think that this setup is a little bit better for Cole in the sense, at least, that he does manage to keep around that Yeti in comparison to that eating removal or something. So that at least is good for him. But he definitely has his work cut out for him now. Sigismar, it's very clear. Two expedition progressions will win it. If he has access to something like a Grand Endeavor in his list, not necessarily guaranteed at this point, but something like that could be really strong on a turn like this one. And yeah, one Lost in the Woods already used. Not sure how many Cole's playing, likely two or three. But any further permanents could be potentially deadly from here as well.
Yeah, a seemingly bold start for that Muna Druid to provide anchored right away, but now we see why that was. The Floral Tent, another addition from Trial by Frost. If an anchored character would leave my expedition during the afternoon, it loses anchored instead. So some defense that's also a one cost resupply from anywhere is just a very potent tool, flexible for some card advantage as well as some protection, and should help Cole navigate through this turn with a Yeti out the entire time.
Yeah, it definitely helps, but this other floral tent that we see in reserve is going to be hard pressed to find another character. Characters are going to be so important here in order to shore up what's currently in play, and just assuming that at some point Sigismar will be finding removal spells to interact with characters. So they're sort of at a critical point here where Cole needs to find characters, and removal for Sigismar is going to look really, really good in general. But the nice thing to some extent as well is having one mana plays like so now in the reserve for Tasia just lets him again and again as much as possible just wait to get maximum information before playing out. But at this rate, if the last two cards from Sigismar are something like a 2 mana or 1 mana play, plus a card like Teamwork Training, it's gonna be a really nice position for him to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and we're using the so, dropping in this Persephone, and a very impressive 633 stat line here, turning the region into forest only, but a geyser coming out to put that right back in hand and also become a mana orb means that um, we're going to lose a little bit of the potency here. We could still replay it out and have it become a 4 due to the Yeti, which will secure that. Is that a double progression for us here?
Yep. Yeah,
Fantastic.
for Cole does take a double progression off of that. Geyser, not the removal spell that he wants to find there in order to prevent that from that line from working at least. But no, in this case, that turned out really well for Cole and Tasia. Yeah, Geyser, really cool card to see, but just not at its best in that situation that we saw it on.
Yeah, does a geyser on the Yeti prevent a double progression there, even though it would lead to um, us seeing, yet another turn with the Yeti out?
Yes, I mean in that case, I believe we were going to see another turn with the Yeti out anyway. I think sometimes in general, you think of removal and you think of it meaning that, like, especially with Tasia, where the first character you play each afternoon is the one that gets the boost, you think, okay, if I deal with this, they will replay it, but it won't be as good or it won't have the same stats. And I think likely something was just missed there along the lines of that. Definitely possible. And just in general, oftentimes you don't expect somehow, like psychologically, I feel like if you return something to hand as like a removal, you don't like feel like it's just going to come right back out and bite you. This
Right,
case,
right.
Persephone definitely does.
Yeah, Persephone put in some work there. Um, Cole coming into the main chat to let us know that he'll be falling off for the rest of this game. Thank you very much. But before he does that, we will see a Spindle Moon of Bastion rare come out. This does provide a boost at noon and gives tough 2 to all of our characters. So, I would say don't count yourself out yet, Cole. We might still have a chance here. Kakoba will make that hard
Kokoba
for you, though.
coming up massive. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely giant stats. And if Cole is not able
Let's
to
see.
respond with the hero expedition, we will see a double advance from our opponent here. So this might be Siggy's time. See what Cole's last card is in hand.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it could be a dead draw of something like a Lost in the Woods that doesn't have targets. Oh, but it is a character that at least, yeah, that definitely takes it.
It
Whew.
sure does.
Uh,
Cole trying to
for a
make us.
second, I thought he didn't have it, but yeah, he was making us sweat.
It was the Hollywood play. We'll let it go though this time. Congratulations, Cole. Good round there. And I will take us back over to the interview screen so that we can head to our next match. Um,
Yep.
cool to
Well
see
done.
Yeti for the first time in a Muna deck in quite a while on stream, I believe.
Yeah, Yeti's very sweet, but I must say I'm disappointed that I didn't get to spectate a Cole game and just say "Moth Moth" as commentary. So, um, yeah, unlucky there, huh?
Yeah, just a little bit. Now the
Any
next,
plays you want to check out?
well, I was really hoping to check out Table 4. That was the match between Sarcasm and Dimogenes, who were on last week, but it looks like they finished already. So we will be heading
Hmm.
a little bit further down, and let's check out um, Bite versus Mandarin PJ. So Mandarin,
Yep.
our second time spectating one of their. Oh, actually, yeah, no, we'll spectate their game. That sounds good. So
Cool.
we'll head back in, hop over to the gameplay to see yet again Fen facing down Aphanis. But we do see this very cool, unique. I believe Mandarin was on this last time I watched one of their games. A very powerful uh, returning a card from reserve to hand. So you get the Hathor ability on there, and then you can also discard a card from reserve to roll dice and get a bunch of extra boosts. In this particular case, we rolled quite hot and super powerful stat lines based on the winter outfits, pumping us up to the maximum potential for both the croupier and the aloe vera there.
Yeah, I think that might have been a crime according to the Geneva Convention there. Rolling a 6 on a non-Nevenka character for an Ouroboros Croupier unique, that is super sweet. Pretty illegal. Also with winter outfits out, meaning that that's not even spike stats, that's just flat stats. Really nice. Um, Interestingly, yeah, the Fun is super behind in the situation as well. Fen definitely threatening to take the game down quickly here. Definitely some things still going for the Aphanis does keep a character around in the form of the Spindle Harvesters, and having a Flamel in reserve is definitely better than having, um, many other things that they could be working with. Oftentimes, it's actually just better than having it in hand due to both the reduced from reserve cost, but also oftentimes that support ability can be really relevant.
Yeah, reducing the cost on a spell just allows you to get so much advantage as a fun. As it acts as an after you with so many of your spells. Just getting to
Mhm.
play out something like a magical training immediately for no cost, or playing it from reserve for cheaper, as well as beauty sleep and helping hand. Plenty of cards that Aphanis or that Flamel rather will help you push through and give you more information before you have to act on any of your removal or pumping effects. See this. Here we go. The Anansi coming out for very good value here. A or two cost from reserve rather for 4/4/4 stats. Pretty powerful, and still plenty of action from Fen this turn. It looks like last turn or this turn, Aphanis did not choose to make a mana orb, instead electing to keep the maximum amount of cards in hand.
Yeah, that can sort of happen in some of these later, more desperate stages of the game. Noticing as well in the discard pile, the Aphanis uniques that they're working with, one of them does resupply, but in general, there isn't any card advantage coming from those. So I'm not super surprised to see that they're working with very few cards left here. That is just often the way that that goes. Also, seeing common mage answer with that means that they're going to be even more starved for card advantage, not having an easy out to draw more cards there.
Mhm.
And yeah, currently Fen just playing this turn so cleanly, starting with the Anansi there. Um, even know that that is one of the cheaper and best things you can play, and you often want to save those towards the end of the turn. Seeing that Afana started off by playing the Conjuring Seal prevents something like a Tooth Fairy from being drawn and then sabotaging it away. So I really like the line that the Fen player took there. That was nice.
Yeah, well played to Mandarin PJ on Fan and as well to maybe Bite on the Aphanis there. And we will head back over to see if we've got any more action before heading into round six for the evening. So, as we're heading into this last round, remind you guys that this is the AWOL Altered Weekly Online League Season 2 for Trial by Frost Week 3 Wednesday event. If you would like to participate in one of these events in the future, you can click on the link in the description to get to the tournaments. That is true for each event, and we will go live shortly before to remind you to hop on in. You want to be able to get those alerts early, be sure to subscribe to the channel and also check out the Discord where Simon will keep you more than informed on all of the Monday and Wednesday activities that you can join in. My name is Jalix at the Tabletop Tinker on YouTube, and also we have Keelan Guy here with us today. Keelan Guy, as we're heading into this last round, how are you feeling about some of the top players you've seen today? And do you have a guess on what our final undefeated hero will be?
I'm going to guess. I know I've been seeing a lot of Sigismar at top tables. I have a feeling we're gonna have a Sigismar mirror in the finals today, but definitely possible it could be Tasia as well. Definitely, there's a few heroes up there, Faunus, I believe, as well. So, like, probably somewhere between Sigismar, Faunus, and Tasia.
Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
would.
and I'm also on YouTube. I'm at Kilonga on YouTube. Feel free to check out my channel as well.
Yes, in the description of the stream, Keelan Guy's channel has been linked, so be sure to click on his name directly and go ahead and throw him a sub. He's got some good stuff going on
I
over there.
am terrible at self-promotion, and I never think about that sort of thing. I just let other people handle it for their stuff and just move back on to thinking about whatever other games I am playing in my head. But no, definitely should be on the ball with that as well. I should be on the ball with making some more YouTube content as well. So we'll see if I get to that.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll definitely be getting up some more content soon. Unfortunately, the Zero to Hero for our Sigismar gameplay has been delayed slightly, but I will keep you folks informed on that as I continue to commentate these events. I was just trying to get into the table 20 to view that match, but was getting a couple of errors. So we are going to head instead to um, our match against Silbilly versus Gato Eldorado 97. That is going to be our Sierra versus Aphanis. So this is the same, excuse me, Sierra versus Akesha. This is the same Akesha we were looking at earlier this evening. So aware of some of the threats available to this deck in the late game. And as we see, both players are deep in the stacks here. So we have not activated our um, Katagear yet this turn. Might still see a powerful spell coming out in just a moment. But our Sierra player is churning through their deck with the help of the Ouroboros.
Yeah, definitely, cool seeing that category out as you mentioned. But interestingly, Kalana
Uh-oh.
Heater in play. Ooh, that boom does take down the category, which is definitely a important thing to be doing at this point. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that is
seeing a
punishing.
Kalana Keter in play like that at just the 2 mana one as well. Interestingly, oftentimes we'll see from Sierra the rare, which has a 3 cost from hand, which enables that hero ability. But in this case, yeah, doesn't really matter in this case. Boom doing a great job taking down the Katagear at a critical moment. That is sort of the problem with some of these Katagear Akesha builds is yeah, if your Katagear meets removal when you need it not to, when you pay 8 mana for it, you will lose.
Yeah, I've someone who in the Beyond the Gates meta was really into the idea of Hydrocana early on, and then very quickly I decided that the only Hydrocana I want to play is a free one off an Arak and Kibble. I do not like getting my stuff removed, and as the removal gets better going into set two, that's definitely something you have to watch out for with some of these higher cost cards as well. People are getting real good at shooting your stuff out of the sky.
Yeah, for those of you who do not enjoy playing against Runefolk and him repeatedly playing 6 small step giant leaps in the same turn or whatever, with 30 cards in hand, yeah, keep your removal around and remove Katagear with it. I promise it will help.
Absolutely. Now we are officially able to get into the table 20 match, and it looks like we are just about wrapped up here. We'll see what happens with Dusk.
And another important thing to note, I can confirm we do have the same player who went 6-0 last week with the Tasia from Beyond the Gates build, is also 5-0 now. So we'll be in the finals against Cladius, who's on Sigismar, who we saw earlier as well. So that's really cool. Interested to see whether Tasia can run it back.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. A battle of the big stickies. We've got here a Sneezer Shroom, which will be headed up to 5 stat for the turn, versus a Persistent Asmodeus at 666 stat. And on the final arena. So we are very close as far as cards go, and just about matched in mana as well. We'll have to see what resources are available to help one of these players get all the way there.
Excited to see in the discard for our Fen player a Ride the Bifrost. That's cool.
Pardon?
I don't think I've seen. I've played this card back in Beyond the Gates. I had a rare slot free at some point, and I was telling myself, I want to play something that I've never played before in my rare slot while I have the chance before the new set comes out. So I
Hmm.
did start playing my one of rare Ride the Bifrost and Aphanis, but I've also never seen this come out of Fen. So cool. I wonder if that took an expedition or not.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like to see these unique pieces that don't come in very much. Also, noticed that we had Sleigh Ride in Fenn's discard there. One of my favorite cards out of this set, particularly for Fen type gameplay, where you just get to have all these cards in reserve. You don't necessarily always get to use them. Turning them into some stats feels pretty good. Oh my goodness, and a paint prison. Um, this Fen has so many different tools going on. This is really cool.
Yeah, this is crazy. I'm wondering, like, this point, it almost looks, if I didn't see the multiple Tanukis and the multiple Hathors, I would almost wonder if it was a singleton build.
Right.
Really cool stuff just in general, flying all around. Oh, we see another cool thing though, rare copy of Magic Beans coming out from Tasia.
D beans. Yep. Very good at shutting down. Unfortunately, really shutting down a rare Esmeralda here with zero access to forest stat. But still some options to go here for our Fen player. I'm curious if we're going to pull out this paint prison.
Yeah, interestingly, not only good against the Esmeralda there, but also good against playing the Lyra Kroloff Dancer on that side. Not that the
Mm.
sides matter in arena here, but still,
Yeah, I
just one one more thing that wouldn't otherwise be good. But yeah, we are seeing this Paint Prison come out. Does discard the card from reserve to reduce the cost, and chooses to get rid of that sticky character that was sticking around there. I like it. It's going to be hard to beat this Asmodeus.
yeah, weirdly enough, the paint prison could have actually hit the magic beans too and put back this forest and, or sorry, this mountain and water stats on the map. But as it stands, we are still fighting over only forest. So as we see the rare Parvati come out, it can give itself anchored. Not going to matter too much in the arena, and it's looking like it'll be a tough ask to put this Asmodeus out and win here. But never count them out.
Beauty Sleep could lock it up, though. Yeah,
Yep,
Beauty
we do
Sleep
sleep.
could do the
We do
trick
have
here
the
for
wonder.
1 mana.
That'd be such a sick last card. Let's do it.
Does Maple Soul have it? Right here.
And
Yes,
they
it
have
does.
incredible
Wow.
call. This is the second.
Does
I think
yeah.
Helon Guy is putting removal into players' hands for the ultimate last play of the turn for each of these because this seems to keep happening. And I take no part in this. I blame Keelan Guy exclusively the players who draw removal.
Fair enough, honestly.
That was a fun last one to see. Love when the last card, it's just the difference maker there. We saw that amazing play, or You and I saw the amazing Afanis play earlier. Unfortunately, we were baseball commentators at that point for everybody on the chat.
It's
We are
true.
headed into this final round, and it looks like our table one is going to be Cladius versus Hyper K888. So our Beyond the Gates exclusive Tasia player running circles and heading back to the top table for the second week in a row. We'll move over to that match now. Keelan Guy, any predictions on how this game is going to play out?
I'm really wondering specifically if the access to the Beyond the Gates cards versus having access to also Trial by Frost and Beyond the Gates could make a difference here.
Mhm,
Especially like with these sticky characters that Tasia often has that gain anchored, being able to play something like a Floral Tent to just give them that little bit of extra, defense against removal without having to play a card like the Spindle out, also resupplying at the same time, I do think can be really relevant in a matchup where I'm expecting to see teamwork trainings flying around.
mhm.
Um, but whether that's a choice based on card availability or not, I have no idea. It could just be that they're just going for a consistent list that they're familiar with. And I do believe that Tasia is one of these decks that can just have truly like unbeatable draws when things go right for them. So I wouldn't count Tasia out, but I definitely think this will favor our Sigismar.
All right. Well, we will keep that in mind as we're heading into this round. This Lyra Thespian is coming in to take over the stats on the Foundry mechanic. So, are we seeing a double progression or one progression per player here to start our match? And drawing a bunch of low cost stuff. So, that's always an interesting way to start the game. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, Lyra Thespian has been honestly really impressive to me from Tasia, actually specifically.
Mhm.
Just the hero ability enables it so easily and so well. And for 2 mana, when you end up with a 4/4/4, and if it's your first character in the turn, sometimes 5/5/5 for stats is absolutely crazy in a lot of situations, which is great. And yeah, now we're seeing interesting developments. One player choosing to develop card advantage over time. That's Artesia taking a double progression with an Aloe Vera. And Cladius on Sigismar chooses to deploy out a Monolith Ortis Bastion, instead saying, my stats are going to be really good for either for the rest of the game or until you find removal for this Monolith.
Yeah. And giving up the double progression there, but promising to have a very strong swing back, especially with starting from the Toad Bureaucrat himself, the Frog Prince, and heading into whatever card advantage might be coming down from Sigismar here. Strong start by both players.
Definitely. While we're waiting for mana decisions, want to note I mentioned earlier, Cladius is the leader and founder of Team Altered Aces. Definitely one of the premier altered teams in France at the moment. And their goal is just in general to be the best. They're taking Altered super seriously. They have sort of an internal pro team that they've chosen based on tournament results thus far and also ladder rankings, and they take it really seriously. They stream regularly, so if you're a French speaker and you enjoy some Altered streams, feel free to check them out on Twitch. But yeah, otherwise, they're taking the game super seriously. We saw a bunch of them in this event thus far, and they've done really well today. Good job to them.
Yep, and it looks like they're gathering some more data points with multiple different iterations of this Sigismar build. We saw a couple different cards when both of our Altered Aces players were in the mirror match earlier. So, wondering what new insights they'll have at the conclusion of these matches.
I agree. I think already we're seeing something interesting from them. I think these triple monolith builds are really what they're favoring at the moment. There's some flexibility otherwise that we're seeing between the different players, but I think they're all starting to agree that that might be the optimal way of building the deck at the moment, largely because of the ability to just enable these turn two monolith plays that we saw this game, for example. Luckily for Artesia, we did see the resupply off of Aloe Vera resupply something that can actually just remove the monolith outright. So, not working without the tools to potentially play through that, but Mana Reaping would give our Sigismar an additional mana. So, whether he chooses to do that yet or not is still up for debate. We could just see something like Lyra Thespian come out here, look really overstated, and not really care about the monolith for the time being. So, we'll see.
Yeah, there is time to deal with that threat at a later date. If we can score another double progression here, we'll be a simple two places away from match point. And at that point, the question is being asked to Sigismar, how much can we actually provide that pressure? But Sandman going to come in and help that get a little easier by putting something to sleep. And if we decide that we let him get away with yet another double progression, we just get to boost up our character.
Yeah, not gonna lie though, this is looking pretty solid for our Tasia player, actually. I think there's multiple ways that they could find a double advance this turn,
Hmm?
or at least multiple cards in their deck that would allow them to do so. Or otherwise just, keep stuff around. Likely we'll just be getting rid of this monolith this turn, if they don't choose to go for a line that would let them double advance. So we'll see. I like the play from Cladius to sleep their own Frog Prince, realizing that they are otherwise likely to get outstatted anyway, largely because of that spike stats that the Frog Prince does have. Not showing up super well into that mountain expedition that Tasia's looking to progress on. And it does seem that the Tasia is just going to play at that Lyra Thespian and progress on the hero side, and does
And
have
the
a
Chiron.
character to take the double advance.
Yep, very solid here to get that double advance. So putting the counter on the Chiron, saving one for later with that sticky Spindle Harvester here. And Spindle Harvester will also get that resupply next turn due to having the two boosts. So solid position for Tasia going into this next turn.
I think the thing that's really good about this line from Artesia player is now the ability to simply take an entire turn off if they wish to do so, where the Sigismar still has to commit resources into play while just removing things like the monolith. Any expedition progression here is sort of something that the Sigismar can't let happen at this point. And there's just really good setup potential from this point for Tasia, either able to anchor something new or go after the monolith and just otherwise drain the already limited resources that Sigismar is working with. Also, notably, Tasia on good expeditions for fighting into something like the Sandman that's currently in reserve. Like, wow, everything's coming up well at the moment for Tasia.
It seems so well aligned. Absolutely. Taking out this monolith here, as you mentioned, just seems like a good way to go right now. And honestly, putting out this Drakena could still leave us in a good position to force a play out of Siggy on the hero expedition. But Siggy's got to decide what they're going to do first. 6 mana to go and several cards in hand. We see that rare Ordis recruit, or excuse me, Ordis trooper come out from the first match. Whenever another non-token character joins the expedition, you have three or more characters create an Ordis recruit in your companion expedition. So from here, this Ordis trooper is just going to continue to put pressure on the companion side. Oof, and a teamwork training will answer the Drakena immediately, giving Siggy a double progression here. Um, Tasia, not devastated by that turn, got to take care of the bastion from the side of Siggy, so taking a lot of pressure off now, and just has to find a way to score those last two progressions to take it home.
Yeah, I think honestly that was a really excellent turn from Tasia in my perspective.
Mhm.
Cladius just with so few cards left here. The thing that is nice for him, that being a mana reaping instead of something like a Lost in the Woods that went after that permanent, they do have an additional mana this turn, which in some cases just means they can keep a card here, and it's
Mhm.
like they're at parity. So it's sort of like more card draw in a way. Um, so that is one thing that is going for them, but as it stands, just the fact that Tasia was able to force them to play out that teamwork training there, working just purely off the top of their deck now is the Sigismar. And yeah, any strong plays that come out from Tasia are likely to be potentially game defining at this point.
Yeah, and speaking of strong plays, let's go ahead and look into this unique Sneezer Shroom. From hand gains anchored, from reserve up to one target character with hand cost three or less will gain anchored. So, you know, 2 turns from now, looking at keeping somebody else around, but at the moment, just impressive stats on our hero expedition.
Yeah, and I really like what is happening as well. Just playing methodically to that hero side and saying like, yeah, sure, you can take a double progression if you have removal as well, but no matter what, I'm going to keep something around for next turn. And all the other plays are looking really solid. That Tasia will have access to off of that. Um, Especially because any progression here now at this point will result in I was gonna say, will result in them getting adjacent. Now they are adjacent as there was no removal to come out, and they also had a beauty sleep. Yeah, things looking really good for Tasia, just needing to find a single expedition progression here in order to lock this one up.
Yeah, sleeping that frog there is super powerful, allowing us to go into our next spot on the tumult, just absolutely dominating in the stats that matter. So in this particular case, mountain and water. Tasia is at match point and has a significant lead on both of those stats to start things off. And this beauty sleep hitting our frog is going to make it an even harder uphill battle for our Sigi player.
Yeah, interesting choosing to commit that beauty sleep right off the bat, just going after something, essentially saying, my hand's really good, and I'm not going to show you it
Hmm.
until as late as possible. Also interesting to note the choosing to play that Lyra Thespian out before something like this Muna Caregiver from reserve means that Muna Caregiver wouldn't threaten to potentially take a companion side expedition, but in any case, it won't matter here. Cladius saying GG in the chat. Looks like we have a back-to-back Wednesday AWOL champion here in this Tasia build of Hyper Case.
Yeah, Hyper slamming the door in a convincing fashion here. A second mana reaping coming out. Just sort of a victory lap at this point, it feels like. Oh, nope. Here we go with the sticky note seal.
That can't hit anything.
Yep. So we've got impressive stats in the Hero Expedition to close it out. Hyper K88, your double champion for the last 2 weeks of Altered Weekly Wednesday from AWOL. So congratulations to them. Yeah, just very, very impressive from both players here, and cool once again to see, you know, uh, the cards from Trial by Frost are very impressive. There's lots of new things you can do, but if you know your deck in and out, you have some uniques you believe in, and you play well, you can absolutely get there in this league. So, for folks who might not feel like they have their perfect setup yet, feel free to join us. We're going to have some awesome gameplay either way, and we would love to have you along for some games. Keelan Guy, we are going to sort of head towards a wrap up conversation as we look towards our next game. How are you feeling about how everything has gone this week?
Honestly, I'm pretty happy. I think we're still seeing really good deck diversity. I know finishing 5-1 just now, we have a Kojo player as well.
Oh,
So that's
nice.
cool. We definitely still have Bravos representation in the top decks. We just didn't see it in action at this moment. But yeah, lots of cool things going around. I think that, it was nice seeing some Lindaway in there. We saw early on Sadi, Golrang. That's exciting. But yeah, top decks still looking largely like some of the same heroes that we've been seeing before are definitely still up there. I think it's cool also just seeing that Beyond the Gates cards are still perfectly good. Winning back-to-back tournaments like that, that's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, overall, feeling pretty good about the meta. I think things are reasonably fair, which is nice, and there's still a lot of cooking that can be done. And what else would I say? I'm also really excited about Fen decks at the moment as well. I think Fen is a hero that's really flexible now, which is sweet.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, we've headed down to the games versus Insane 94 versus Dimogenes. So seeing a Sierra v Kojo matchup here. And it kind of felt like Sierra swapped with Kojo from last week's coverage of the most exciting deck that seems to have a bunch of cool answers and some new iterative uh, deck design that you haven't necessarily seen before. So excited to watch the end of this match here. But as you said, so much going on with some of these new heroes. Fen has been showing off some cool things, and our perpetual top table players of Afanas and Siggy still performing very well in this tournament.
Definitely. No surprise to seeing those decks doing well. Just having good options from set one, get some upgrades from set two, and they're off to the races. Yeah, Sierra definitely a deck that's gotten a lot of nice help from the new set, which is
Mhm.
great. Seeing multiple Nilums in play at the moment. Moth.
Moth, indeed. I'm going to flip over to our Sierra players discard real fast just to get a more robust look at what we've got going on. Um, the rare Foundry armorers, I don't think we've seen from any of our previous Sierra players this evening, but a lot of other friendly faces. Mechanical Training, Brass Bug Hive, Gibble, and Frozen Delivery all showing their strengths in these last couple of matches, as well as the Withered Tree, just continually putting out more bugs. If only Brass Bug Hive pumped bugs instead of robots, I think this deck would be even scarier.
It's very true. Noticing the reserve of Kojo, I think interestingly, I mean, we can see on the Tumult Sierra very far ahead at this point.
Mm,
I think interestingly, Kojo just had a draw that was essentially entirely commons up until the last couple turns, and I think that that has often likely made the difference in this draw. And it's just my guess here, but
mhm.
seeing how that can turn out sometimes, it's rough when you're working with a lot of fire rabbits at common. Great card, don't do as well against 2/2/2 brass bugs and moths. So I can understand why Sierra might have gotten some progressions that they might not otherwise have. But yeah, things just coming up Sierra's way in this one.
Yeah, the deck construction in Altered is so interesting, limiting your way of playing, only so many uniques, only so many rares. So when the deck sort of misaligns towards either of those directions. It could even look like opening all three of your uniques in the first hand and being like, I actually don't want all of these right this minute. So I might have to make some tough choices early on. But yeah, in the case of drawing all of your staple commons that aren't necessarily putting up the big numbers you would expect out of some of your rares and uniques, you can just get outvalued.
Fair enough. Now is
Well,
a good time to mention, by the way, if anyone out there who's watching this stream is on or in an altered team, please reach out to me, especially if you don't think that I have any details about your team as such. If you're playing competitive altered, especially online, let me know. You can find me on most of the altered discords under the Keelon Guy moniker. Yeah, feel free to reach out if if you're on someone who wants some coverage for your team. I have a little dossier put together for us commentary people that we have access to so that we can talk about you guys. We want to help you get new fans and give more details about what you're about. So feel free.
yes, let Keelan Guy the historian guide your path and make your mark in history with this one. All right, so it looks like we are down to our very last match, and it is towards the top tables. This is Arthur Bacalar versus Carnegie, both in the Siggy Mirror once again. Headed to the gameplay screen now. Both players are equidistant on the Tumult, similar amount of cards available to them, so still looks like anybody's game at the moment. Looks like we just missed a unique Baba Yaga that draws cards and gains boosts and can give a character fleeting. That's pretty cool.
And yeah, these are both Sigismar players that we've seen at different points with different builds as well. Mobile Armory coming out from Karnag, but and conversely, we have that Haven Warrior build of Arthur Bacalar's. Yeah, just interesting where different slots are heading in the deck. And I believe Karnag also has access to Jack Frost in their list. So yeah, definitely still like things are not solved with where you should be or where you might want to be with these decks still. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we get to a spot where people are feeling like it is solved, we have enough pieces now in the game with things like cards by Trial by Frost that at any given time, putting up a rogue strategy or changing up your removal suite could be the difference between winning and losing in some of these more competitive areas. So keep brewing, keep testing what works.
Definitely, but yeah, we're currently in some of the most difficult stages of these turns where you're both trying to predict what your opponent has access to still, while on similar numbers of cards to them and on lower and lower mana totals here. And every decision is so critical at this point, figuring out what you can beat, what you can't beat, what is most likely for them to have, and what is less likely for them to have. Like the lines coming out so far, especially from Arthur on top, playing it very slowly with these Ortis troopers, a more conservative play, just waiting as long as possible before pulling the trigger on the rest of their mana.
Yeah, watching these players dance around each other with all these low cost cards, definitely one of the things that you're going to see in Altered a lot. Just these mini after you effects that make these low cost cards so powerful.
That and the fact with Ortis Trooper specifically, it's harder to get a better rate than that in terms of
Yes.
stats for mana. That card is so strong. 1/2/2 for 1. Yes, it is a rare slot, but you are getting what you're paying for. Like, that's a sweet card.
Yeah, absolutely. As a fellow former Magic player, you've got to respect the powerful low drops, and sometimes you got to pay up for them, and that is okay.
Definitely. We are seeing Charge
Ooh,
come
a
out here in
charge.
a massive way to take it entirely. That will be a win for Arthur Bacalar. Unfortunately, Baba Yaga just a bit too expensive there on a critical turn.
Wow. Well done to Arthur Bacalar. Navigated that dance quite well, and yeah, charge for sure sealing the deal. So I believe that wraps up our tournament. And yeah, there we go. That is
If
all
you're
she.
cool with it, I'll quickly read out our top 16.
Please, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
cool. We have our first place player, Tasia. That is Hyper K888, who ran it back from last week. Awesome finish there. We have, I believe, 5-1 finishes between Azul second, Icarus third, Cladius, and Arthur Bacalar, and then Serotonin JC. So really respectable finishes there. And then going down from there, the rest of our top 16, we have Karnag, also from Team Altered Aces, Shiro Kuroporo, Bread and Water, Get Back Baby, Sarcasm, Beloa 2x4, Caio Marquez, Insane 94, Impuissance, and Devicho GM. So congratulations to all of you guys, and as well to anyone else who, just had a fun time with the event. That's awesome. Well done.
Yeah, glad to have everybody along for the ride who was able to join. If you are watching in the chat and were not able to join this time around, we'd love to have you next week. If you join the AWOL Discord, Simon is setting up timers for all of these events. So you can join us for Monday for a European evening timed event or Wednesday for the American timed event. Um, we will have a rotating set of casters. So uh, more voices for you guys to enjoy as these events go on. Once again, my name is Jalix at the Tabletop Tinkerer on YouTube as well as Twitch, and was joined tonight by the Keelon guy, the resident historian of Altered.
Yes, yeah, and I'm at Killing Guy on YouTube. And yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Jalex. It was a fun time. Great event.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and hang out for just a second here to take any questions the chat might have, but otherwise, we will let you guys get back to your evenings here shortly. Congratulations once again to the top 16. Be sure to stay tuned in the Discord for any updates on upcoming tournaments.
And of course, Tom from 39cards.com will likely have these results up pretty shortly if you're looking to check out these deck lists for yourself without having to sign in to BGA and track down the players. So yeah, keep your eye out there as well. Check out those deck lists. It's always nice, I think.
Absolutely. 39cards.com is the perfect way to check out results from all sorts of events. You can search by your favorite hero as well. So if you're just looking for a particular tech for a character you like to see or want to know a little bit more about the meta before jumping into one of our Monday or Wednesday tournaments, that is the place to go. And as of this moment, it looks like there is no questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead and sign off here. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and be sure to check back in next week. Keelan Guy, any parting thoughts?
No, I'm good. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It was good to see you. And for all of you out there, have a great evening.
Take care.